Chapter 23:11. The moment the crimson firmament waves passed through the passage, they felt as if they had passed through a thin film of water. The rich spiritual energy that greeted them made them feel refreshed. Looking up, it was as if they were surrounded by a sea of stars. They were wandering in such a boundless sea of stars. Even the crimson firmament waves were like a grain of sand in the sea of stars, as small as a speck of dust. Such a vast sea of stars made everyone feel a little intoxicated. At this moment it was as if they had melted into a speck of dust in the air, floating along with the vast sea of stars. Don't be intoxicated. A cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Zhou Huan and the others, who had weak willpower, woke up in an instant. Turning their heads, they saw the Crown Prince's tall figure standing under the starry night sky. His expression was cold as he looked up at the starry sky, light flashing in his eyes. What are you waiting for? The spiritual energy here is rich. This is a rare opportunity. Sit down and guide the spiritual energy into your body. The Crown Prince turned to look at them and frowned. Ah, yes, yes. Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others quickly sat down cross-legged and focused on guiding the spiritual energy into their bodies, quietly cultivating. Arbor sat on the empty deck at the front of the ship. At this moment, she had already entered a mysterious state. What she saw was herself walking barefoot in the vast Milky Way, kicking the sparkling water of the Milky Way under her feet. As she walked, there was not a trace of wind, nor was there a single cloud. So fast, so fast. Her speed was getting faster and faster. She looked like she was walking, but in fact, she was flashing like light at a speed that was hard to distinguish with the naked eye. Mo Lien, who was leaning against the railing and watching Jojo cultivate, was suddenly stunned. A hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. Oh my God, his little wife was going to ascend to the heavens. What lingered around his wife was not the five-colored spiritual energy, but dot star fragments that looked like specks of dust surrounded her body. This was clearly holy power. The strongest power in the world, also known as the star field power or star power. The little guy who had not broken through to the great spiritual master level had actually sensed the purest holy power in the world. Looking at the saint force, they were scrambling to enter the little one's body, but they were blocked by a stream of light. Mo Lien then set his mind at ease. He already knew that this little thing's body was very strange. It was as if there was a powerful protective force hidden in her small body. Anything that would harm her body would be inadvertently blocked by this force. Although the saint energy was good, the little thing's current body would definitely not be able to accept it. Even if he forcefully absorbed it, he wouldn't be able to absorb it. To her, the saint energy was no longer a supplement. Instead, it was harmful to her body. She was someone who had not even reached the divine state yet. You want her to accept the saint energy beyond her level? Aren't you just looking for trouble? The pitiful spiritual energy was blocked by the turbulent and overbearing saint energy, and it could not even get close to Xiqiao's body. Mo Lien was instantly at a loss for words. With a flick of his sleeve, he released the holy fire to absorb the surrounding saint energy. This allowed the surging spiritual energy to pass through the layers of obstacles and rush towards their little master's Dantian star field without any hindrance. A ball of extremely strong light was absorbed by the Dantian star field along with the spiritual energy from all directions. Whoosh, whoosh. Another 2 balls were absorbed into the Dantian star field. Arbor opened his eyes in confusion. Chapter 23:12. Wasn't this her Dantian star field? Just like the starry sky in front of her, her Dantian star field was also vast and boundless. A fist-sized star was hanging high in the center of the star field. This star, which was supposed to be the most dazzling, was still in a deep sleep. It was surrounded by 4 stars of almost the same size but different colors. Only the blue fish orchid star was lit up. In addition, there was a small Chuyun star floating in the distance. It was close to a colorful paradise star. However, at this time, she could clearly see that 3 white nameless stars were absorbed into this star field. They were floating in the upper left corner of Chu Yun's star. 3 nameless stars? Arbor was moved. His spiritual awareness captured the small spiritual awareness body and let her go in for a stroll. The spiritual awareness body ran around the 3 spacious nameless stars in a very funny way. It ran until it was out of breath before it stopped. No, it was paralyzed. It was paralyzed on one of the nameless stars. It was so lazy that Arbor couldn't bear to look at it. This thing definitely couldn't be her spiritual awareness body. Could it be that these 3 nameless stars were absorbed from the starry sky by the Dantian star field? The spirit domain's secret realm? This was too bandit. However, Jojo was very satisfied. With 3 more star fields, no matter what she used them for in the future, they were still her star fields. Even if she used them to feed Paradise Star in the future, it would still be good. The star chart in front of her was faintly blurred. Arbor knew that she was going to leave this special state of enlightenment. When she opened her eyes, it was as if 2 vortexes of broken stars appeared in her eyes. They were so deep that it seemed like they were going to absorb everything in the world. Only when the spiritual power around her body dissipated did she completely walk out of the state of enlightenment. She had entered the state of enlightenment for no reason and had also advanced by a level for no reason. She had also received 3 nameless stars for no reason. Arbor thought that this trip to the red firmament blue waves was really quite reliable. An 8th rank spirit master. Miss Chiao lowered her head and looked at her small hand. The spirit energy on her palm had yet to completely disperse. There was a faint layer of strange energy attached to it. This spiritual energy seemed to be very strong. Mo Lien had already arrived in front of her with a flutter. Without saying a word, he reached out and hugged her. Holding her little hand, he looked it up and down, left and right. Clicking his tongue in wonder, he said, "Little guy, you've absorbed a little star power into your spiritual power." This little rank 8 spiritual master in front of him could probably kill 2 rank 12 great spiritual masters with a single wave of spiritual pressure. That was the strongest force in the star field. It carried out the laws of heaven and earth, and the weak couldn't win against the strong. Mo Lien expressed that the little guy might be able to kill a level 15 great spiritual master with 1 punch. Xiao Mu gazed at him blankly before hugging his arm and shouting, Lien, let me tell you something. My spiritual sense actually didn't increase. This really shouldn't have happened. Her spiritual sense was different from other people's. Every time she advanced, which one wasn't accompanied by the rhythm of her spiritual sense skyrocketing. It was very strange that it didn't increase this time. It's nothing. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to cover his face. He secretly said in his heart, "Wife, it doesn't matter whether your spiritual sense increased or not. You're already able to integrate a trace of sacred power into your spiritual realm cultivation. Your husband is really speechless." Arbor reached out and clenched her fist. She lowered her head listlessly. Forget it. Whether it increased or not can't be forced. Ah, look. There seems to be an exit in front. This chapter is a gift. Chapter 23:13. Arbor looked up and saw a light array appearing in the middle of the pitch-black sea of stars. Everything in the world seemed to be sucked into this light array as a strong suction force pressed down on them. The crimson firmament wave was sucked in involuntarily. However, although the force was strong, it could not break through the crimson firmament wave's defense. Therefore, the people on the ship felt fine. As the crimson firmament wave was sucked out by the light array at the exit, there was a moment of darkness in front of everyone's eyes. Then, they saw a glaring light shoot in. The entire ship seemed to have bounced off a soft and moist cover and rushed out of the light formation in an instant. The silence suddenly turned into a cacophony of noises. Shouts, and clamors could be heard incessantly. Wow! I saw a huge 3-storied ship flying in the sky. Quick, pinch me. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Damn, brother, speak properly. You're spitting on my face. What are you so excited about? I've been in the world for 30 years. When I went to the 17th floor of the beast ceiling pagoda, I even saw pigs flying in the sky. You're awesome, aren't you? You're just a little level 7 spiritual master, and you want to go to the 17th floor of the beast ceiling pagoda? You're already panting when you go up to the 5th floor. You're bullshitting. Arbor curiously leaned on the ship's railing and blinked his big eyes as he looked at the crowd below. It was a very bustling town. There were many shops and taverns on both sides of the road. A spacious road was occupied by many stalls. Everyone was squeezed in a narrow path and looked up at their crimson firmament wave ship. It was a hubbub of voices and abnormally noisy. Looking at their clothes, they were all ordinary cultivators. However, there was a clear difference between them and the cultivators from the 6 prefectures' lower star regions. Although their clothes were ordinary, they were very neat and tidy. Their complexions were rosy and they were talking cheerfully. They looked carefree. Could it be that those rotten zombies haven't appeared on the divine land yet? Look at this group of Shenzhou people, they seem to be living quite comfortably. Arbor retracted his head from the railing and almost fell into Mo Lien's arms when he turned around. She didn't know when this fellow had quietly walked up behind her without making a single sound. Arbor glared at him angrily and poked his chin. What should we do, Ren? Put the boat away. This boat was indeed big and ostentatious. It was impossible not to attract attention. Jojo was a very low-key young lady. She was not suitable to be so ostentatious. Therefore, the couple decided that it was better not to attract hatred. It would be better to keep the ship as soon as possible and switch to Qinghuan. Arbor nodded and told Zhou Huan and the others to prepare to float. Several people jumped out of the Scarlet Firmament wave ship at the same time. Arbor used his spiritual sense to drag the giant ship into the fish orchid planet with the help of the small tree. The few of them jumped and landed on Qinghuan's back. Qinghuan flapped its wings lightly and quickly left the crowded entrance of the small town. The group of people below who were chasing after them lost track of Arbor and the others after a few steps. Hey, where did they go? Are those people you're talking about from the middle 6 prefectures? Are you kidding? How is that possible? How can such a divine artifact appear in the small 6 prefectures? Chapter 23:14. A barren place like the middle 6 prefectures can't possibly have such an extraordinary artifact. I'm guessing that it's probably a young master or young mistress from one of the divine prefecture's aristocratic families who came back from their travels. And that big green bird just now, did you see it clearly? That aura it released doesn't feel like an ordinary spirit beast. How can people from the middle 6 prefectures become so powerful? How is that possible? While the entire town was discussing animatedly, they didn't know that Xiao Mu and Mo Lien had openly returned to the crowd with Zhou Huan and the other 7. They had just disappeared in front of people at the fastest speed and no one could catch a trace of them. In this border town that connected the middle 6 prefectures and the divine prefecture, there didn't seem to be many experts. Some of them were ordinary businessmen, some of them were spirit masters who didn't have particularly high cultivation levels. Miss Qiao didn't like to listen to these people's noisy discussions. They were nothing more than praising the people of the divine prefecture and belittling the middle 6 prefectures. But if these people knew that Miss Qiao didn't come from the middle 6 prefectures but from the lower star region, wouldn't they all come to watch as if someone from another star region had invaded? A group of people who were ridiculously arrogant. Arbor was led by Mo Lien to a stable in the northernmost part of town. These weren't ordinary horses. These horses were mostly level 8 or level 9 mystical beasts. Their running speed naturally couldn't be compared to ordinary horses. Their flying beasts were too eye-catching. If they really let them out, it would be like what happened just now, which was very troublesome. The young couple wasn't interested. They were surrounded and watched as if they were divine beasts. How much is it? And level 8 spirit horse for 1 spirit stone. That person stretched out a finger and waved it in front of Mo Lien and Arbor. How about hiring a driver? That depends on where you're going. Dragon Flame City. Dragon Flame City is thousands of miles away from this border town. Even my strongest and most vigorous spirit horse would need at least 10 days to half a month to travel. Mo Lien looked at him expressionlessly. Name your price. The horse seller immediately became spirited and grinned. Young master, you don't know. If I were to hire a coachman for you. 9 horses and a coachman. A coachman and a more comfortable carriage for you. The journey to Dragon Flame City will cost at least 15 spirit stones. 9 horses will cost 9 spirit stones. How about this? I'll give you a discount. How about 20 spirit stones? Mo Lien nodded. She didn't even try to bargain with him. Instead, she reached into her inner world and took out a money pouch. Then, she poured out 20 spirit stones and gave them to the young man. The little brother smiled so widely that his teeth could not be seen. He reached out his claws to touch the few spirit stones and put them all into his pocket. His attitude towards them was clearly more respectful. Young masters and young misses. Please wait a moment. This lowly one will go and prepare now. Oh my, I really couldn't tell that this handsome young master was really a generous grandpa of the god of wealth. Judging from his appearance, he was just a pretty boy. Brother horse seller secretly complained. Unexpectedly, he took out 20 genuine spirit stones without hesitation. He really looked at him in a new light. One had to know that this was Brother Horse Seller's first big business deal since winter. It even benefited that coachman Shen who hadn't had much business for a few days. Chapter 23:15. Brother Seller held the 3 spirit stones in his hand and walked towards carriage driver Chen's dilapidated courtyard with a smile. Giving him 3 spirit stones should be enough. If he had not taken on this big order, carriage driver Chen would still be at home like a corpse. Therefore, it was normal to take a portion of the commission. Move aside, move aside, move aside. All of you, move aside. Rough roars, accompanied by all sorts of curses and complaints along the way, filled this area. A group of aggressive burly men appeared in front of everyone's eyes and were chasing after a young girl who was running in a panic. That scene was not very beautiful. Originally, more than half of this street was occupied by 2 stalls. Now that they had bumped into the scene of burly men catching a young girl, this made the street even more crowded and difficult to walk on. That young girl cried until her eyes were swollen like walnuts, and the corners of her eyes were bloodshot. As she cried mournfully, she hurriedly turned back to take a look. However, when she saw the burly men closing in on her, her eyes were dyed with a trace of fear, and she ran forward wildly. Outside the crowd, that white figure was especially eye-catching. He stood in front of that dilapidated stable. Even though the background was very old and dirty, he looked especially elegant and noble. Arbor had already seen the group of people running over. The little fellow reflexively pulled Mo Lien back by 2 large steps, opening up a path for him. Unfortunately, that young girl who seemed to have an extremely miserable life was still rushing towards them. To be precise, she pounced on Mo Lien. Arbor. Almost as if it was a conditioned reflex, Miss Xiao flew up and kicked heavily on that young girl's chest. She directly sent her flying with a kick. Everyone's jaws dropped at the same time. Including Zhou Huan and the other 8 people standing behind the 2 of them, their shocked expressions were especially hilarious. What was going on? Everyone looked speechlessly at the young girl who bravely kicked that young girl away. With one look, they were immediately stunned. Previously, this little girl had been standing beside the white-clothed man. Her body was wrapped in a thick fur cloak, and her small head was hidden under a hat. At this moment, she swiftly moved. After a kick, the velvet hat on her head slid down to her shoulders, revealing a small, delicate, expressionless face. Pfft! Mo Lien held her forehead and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Look, his bow was so unpredictable. Look at that, he's shocked everyone. Which family had such a fierce young lady? When she saw someone pouncing on her husband, she immediately kicked him away. Poor unfortunate young lady. After being sent flying by Miss Chiao's kick, her delicate and weak body fell heavily to the ground, unable to recover for a long time. Isn't that so? Who would have thought that he, who had such a hard life, would actually meet someone who didn't talk nonsense with him? Everyone looked at the fierce little girl in front of them with different expressions. He felt that the little girl was not in a good mood. People with strong survival instincts had already shut their mouths and retreated to the side, quietly watching the show. But there were always self-proclaimed righteous people who stepped forward to shout with righteous indignation. At this moment, a scholarly man walked out and angrily questioned Arbor, "What's wrong with you, young lady? Why did you kick someone for no reason? She doesn't know how to walk." Arbor frowned. Chapter 23:16. She doesn't even have eyes, pouncing straight at her husband. If I don't beat her up, who should I beat up? Jojo's motto was to beat anyone who dared to pounce on her husband. You don't follow the rules at all. Everyone's jaws dropped again, and the corners of their mouths couldn't help but twitch. Where the hell did this little guy jump out from? Shouldn't such a delicate and soft little girl be very kind? Even if she met those old grandpas and grannies who couldn't walk, she couldn't help but reach out to help them. What's more, a girl who seemed to have such a tragic background ran over to them to ask for help. If it was an ordinary aristocratic family's daughter, shouldn't she ask her husband to save her in order to show her magnanimity and take her in as a personal maidservant while she was at it? If Arbor knew what these people were thinking, he would definitely ruthlessly mock them. Crazy. If you're overflowing with sympathy, then go save her, go be that sunflower and illuminate the common people. This baby doesn't want her husband to save other women. She never thought of herself as a good person, so naturally, she didn't have this kind of pure and holy character. She was a bad silver. Good people don't live long, bad silver world. She'll just be a bad silver. Ta. The little fellow walked a few steps forward, frowning as she looked at that purple lump on the ground. She stretched out her hand and pointed. Take it away. A good dog doesn't block the way. Just leave it here, they still have a lot of horses to bring out later. The righteous scholar was simply about to faint from anger. His finger trembled as he pointed at Miss Chiao, angrily saying, You're a girl, how can you be so unsympathetic? Didn't you see that this girl was completely unable to get up after being kicked by you? You're so devoid of conscience and inhumane, I really don't know which family's lord taught you to be such a top quality. This young master spoils her, why, do you have a problem with it? Mo Lien stared at that righteous scholar and said with a mocking smile, Since you have such a sense of justice, why don't you bring this pitiful girl back and raise her well? The little fellow nodded in agreement with a common enemy, raising both hands in agreement with her husband's words. You should bring her back and raise her. You're so virtuous and full of righteousness. You're such a noble savior of the world, you shouldn't ignore the girl's life and death. Mo Lien continued to ridicule. Why aren't you helping her up and bringing her back? The little fellow again nodded in agreement. Everyone, holy shit. This couple didn't look like normal people at all. The scholar's lips were trembling, and he couldn't say anything at all. The scholar angrily flicked his sleeves and turned to the girl. He reached out to help her up. Miss, let me help you up. She test t-test test, t-t-t-s t-test t-t-s. T-test have t-s to t-t-t t-t-t-t t-t-t-t. Everyone was left speechless. T-go go 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 go. T-est t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t. Shameless. No, auntie, this one didn't do it on purpose. The scholar's face flushed red. Coming. Young master, miss, this one has brought Coachman Chin over. Chapter 23:17. There are still 9 horses. What's the matter? Why are there so many people blocking the way? When Brother Ma returned, he couldn't help but be taken aback when he realized that there was a large crowd at the door. When he raised his head to take a closer look, he saw a tear-stained young girl and a silly scholar with an embarrassed expression on his face. Behind him were several fierce and burly men. He couldn't help but be slightly embarrassed. Old Third, what are you doing? You brought people out to bully men and tyrannize women again and snatch back the pink brothel to do illegal business. Pooh! The leader of the men spat at Brother Ma and said angrily, let me tell you. My business is open and above board. Old Third, spent a total of 15 spirit stones and real gold to buy this little slut back. Now that she wants to escape, shouldn't she return 10 times the purchase price before she escapes? Everyone couldn't help but gasp. 10 times? This Old Third really thought that human life was worthless. He asked for 10 times the redeeming fee as soon as he opened his mouth. Who would have the courage to pay him back? That clearly meant that he wanted that girl to work in the pink brothel for the rest of her life. She's also a pitiful woman, everyone thought. Everyone knew that there weren't many women who could live long after entering the pink brothel. That young lady promptly wailed out in grief, and in front of everyone's stupefied gazes, she threw herself at Mo Lian again. Young sir, save me. Please save Xiao He. This girl was a fool. People always said that a fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. How could she be so foolish? This thought surfaced in everyone's minds at the same time. Sure enough, before that girl could get close to the young master, the stoic-faced little girl beside her moved again. She punched the girl's tear-stained right cheek, which was sobbing very mournfully. The girl was sent flying and landed heavily on the ground with a bang. Miss Xiao shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" Zhou Huan and the rest inexplicably had the urge to burst out in laughter. It was clearly such a bloody and violent scene, but eldest Mrs. Vicious Aura was unexpectedly somewhat funny. No, I can't laugh out loud. At this moment, eldest Mrs. Mood was getting worse and worse. Her 2 delicate eyebrows were already knitted together. Mo Lian coughed lightly. She took 2 steps forward and pulled the raging little girl to her side. She stroked her head to soothe the little thing and smoothed her hair. Ignore her. Let's go. There was no need to pay attention to strange people. He didn't know where that woman called Xiao He got her confidence from, to think that the crown prince would care about her life or death. Miss Xiao He, who had been knocked to the ground once again, was now clenching her teeth so hard that they almost broke. If she hadn't seen that young man take out his money pouch without any hesitation and pour out 20 spirit coins without even blinking his eyes, how would she have the courage to rush over to him and ask for help? This young master had an outstanding temperament and was extraordinarily handsome. He must have come from a wealthy family. If she could be saved by the young master, she would cry a little and let him take her in as a maidservant. In the future, she would be able to enter the young master's house and enjoy wealth and splendor. But what the hell is this female stoic beside this young master? Is she a demon? Why did she repeatedly cut off my fortune? While everyone was chattering, the silent coachman Chen had already hitched up the carriage. He sat on the shaft of the carriage and looked at Mo Lian, Arbor, and the others. Let's go, young master. Chapter 23:18. That girl called Xiao He's fearful gaze, as if she was looking at a devil, made Miss Xiao somewhat displeased. Where did this baffling person come from? Did she think everyone else was a fool? Why must she help? Was she utterly devoid of conscience if she didn't help? She couldn't be like this. At this moment, Old Third he led his men forward ferociously and twisted Miss Xiao He's arms. Take her away. Old Third he was very proficient in the prostitution business. Which girl didn't cry or make a fuss in the brothel? Get used to it. Old Third he waved his hand and shouted angrily, which sounded rather imposing. No, don't, let go of me, let go. Miss Xiao he looked at everyone with teary eyes and a pitiful and pleading look. Save me, save me. Old Third he had long been irritated by her. He impatiently slapped her cheek and rebuked angrily, "Don't pretend to be pitiful here. If you knew this would happen, why did you gamble so heavily in the gambling den? You asked for it. Brothers, do you know how this girl entered the brothel? She's addicted to gambling." He had sacrificed himself in the process. How much money did her brother and sister-in-law put in the past years? They can't afford it this time. She's even delusional enough to think of selling her own little niece into the brothel to pay off her debts. Wow. The crowd was in an uproar. The onlookers started gossiping, each of them beaming with joy and talking at once, all criticizing Miss Xiaohe. Xiaohe couldn't help but panic. She pulled back her hand and grabbed that scholar's sleeve, anxiously shouting, "Save me, save me." The scholar was clearly at a loss. He was a weakling, so how could he face so many fierce-looking burly men? Wasn't this a joke? Seeing that Xiaohe's arms were twisted and she was about to be pushed away, a delicate shout came from outside the crowd. "Stop! What are you doing?" A pair of delicate boots embroidered with plum blossoms appeared in front of everyone's eyes. They saw a 15-year-old girl walk to the front of the crowd with several green-clothed servants clearing the way. That round face was very bright and fair, and her hair was combed into a young girl's bun. Her appearance could only be described as delicate and cute, but not very beautiful. A bunch of men bullying a weak girl, do you have any shame? This is ridiculous. The young girl reprimanded, her eyes filled with disdain as she raised her chin, "Hurry up and release him." Seeing that the situation had taken a turn for the better, Xiaohe turned to look at the little girl in surprise and joy. She cried out, Miss, save me, Mississippi." Coachman Chen sat on the shaft of the carriage and skillfully picked up the horsewhip. He looked in the direction of Mo Lien. Mo Lien reached out to carry the little boy and put him in the car. "Jojo, are you tired? Go and sleep for a while. I'll call you out for lunch at noon." Arbor nodded. She knew Mo Lien's intention. She was in the carriage, so she could roll into the Peach Blossom Star at any time and come out again. After putting Jojo on the carriage, Mo Lien, Zhou Huan, and the others got on their horses and followed the carriage. The crowd naturally parted to the left and right, creating a passageway that wasn't too wide. It would take some effort for the carriage to pass through. Fortunately, Coachman Chen's driving skills were good, and he drove the carriage in a decent manner. Mo Lien wasn't someone who would meddle in other people's business. She didn't pay attention to this farce, and the few of them directly left the crowd. A gust of cold wind blew the curtain of the carriage. Arbor was playing with an exquisite hand warmer with her head down. She didn't notice that someone had passed by outside the carriage window. She suddenly stopped and turned her head. A pair of eyes that were like the stars in a cold night stared fixedly at her for a moment. To make up for yesterday's episode. Chapter 23:19. Big brother, what are you looking at? The round-faced girl kicked off her exquisite boots and grinned as she moved to the man's side. It was really strange that her big brother was staring at that carriage until his eyes were a little straight. Thump thump, thump thump. That man seemed to hear his own heart beating like a drum. The blood in his body inexplicably boiled as if it was trying its best to get closer to that carriage. Why? What kind of strange feeling was this? He had never experienced it before. That it wasn't until he heard his sister's cry that the man inexplicably returned to his senses. He turned around and looked like he was in his 20s. He had a slender figure with sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. His pair of cold eyes swept over the girl without any warmth. Then, he frowned and looked at the tearful girl behind her. Who is she? The little girl was probably already familiar with her brother's coldness. She didn't care at all as she smiled and said, "Big brother, she's called Xiaohe. She's my new maid." The man obviously wasn't interested in knowing who this Xiaohe was. He only coldly swept his gaze over the blushing Xiaohe's delicate appearance as a trace of annoyance flitted across his heart. We didn't come here to play around. Are you sure she can go to the 8 desolate mountain range? A trace of hesitation appeared on the round-faced girl's face. When she was saving the girl before, she didn't think so much at all. She only relied on her hot-bloodedness to save this girl. Now that her brother had pointed it out, she also felt that it was a little inappropriate. After all, they were going to a dangerous place like the 8 desolate mountain range. It was indeed a little cumbersome to bring a weak girl with them. However, since they had already saved the girl, they couldn't just casually throw her away and turn around to leave like this. After thinking about it, the situation was a little unreliable. The round-faced girl looked at Xiao He hesitantly and asked with curled lips, "Why don't you stay in this town for the time being?" Of course, Xiao He wouldn't comply when she heard this. It wasn't easy for her to hook up with a seemingly aristocratic family's daughter. She had the opportunity to leave this border town and fly far away, rising step by step. How could she allow herself to continue staying in this godforsaken place? If she didn't firmly grasp this opportunity in her hands, she would definitely regret it in the future. Xiao He wept as she looked at the round-faced girl. "Miss, please take me with you. I can't stay in this town anymore. My brother and sister-in-law are both gambling addicts. If I can't leave with Miss this time, my brother and sister-in-law will definitely not let me off when they come back tomorrow. Now that they have caught me, they will definitely not let me go. They will sell me to the pink brothel for spirit stones again. Please be merciful, Mississippi. Take me with you." Xiao He begged bitterly. The girl looked at her brother. "Big brother, she's so pitiful. Let's take her with us. Just now, she told me that her culinary skills are not bad. At that time, when we enter the 8 desolate mountain range and kill Xian beasts, we can even ask her to clean up and cook for us. You won't have to eat rations every day." The young man glanced at Miss Xiao He with a sharp gaze. Xiao He was so scared that she rolled on the ground and kowtowed to the man. "Xiao He will not be a burden to everyone. Please take me in, young master. Young master, please take me in." After he finished speaking, he kept kowtowing. Chapter 23:20. The young master didn't say anything more. He coldly glanced at Xiao He, then turned around and left with a flick of his sleeve, leaving Xiao He and the others a lonely and desolate figure. Xiao He clenched her silver teeth and was very resentful. Speaking of which, her beauty far surpassed the round-faced girl beside her, but she didn't expect that the young master really didn't even look at her. He treated her like the mud under his feet, completely disdaining to give her a glance. This made her angry, but at the same time, she also had some doubts about herself. Could it be that her charm had declined? Otherwise, why would she successively suffer in front of 2 young masters in such a short period of time? Noticing that the round-faced girl's probing gaze had fallen on her, Xiao He hurriedly restrained her emotions and lowered her head, putting on a weak and helpless appearance. The round-faced girl looked her up and down for a while, then with a wave of her hand, she threw 6 yellow talismans to her. "You don't have the slightest bit of cultivation or Xian energy, so you can't use high-level talismans. These 3 middle-level defensive talismans, 2 middle-level speed talismans, and 1 middle-level attack talisman are for you to use for self-defense. If you encounter any danger, at a critical moment, you can still save your little life. When we enter the 8 desolate mountain range, remember to follow us closely. You must not act on your own initiative and cause trouble for us." Xiao He was stunned, then her face immediately revealed an ecstatic expression. Wow! For a servant who had just been taken in for less than an hour, 6 valuable talismans were given out in one go. Although she came from a small border town, she had also heard that things like the 5 spirit talismans could be sold for a sky-high price in the black market. This young lady's identity must be extraordinary. Her eyesight was really good. She knew that this time she must have hoped for a gold mine. As long as she worked hard in the future, she would definitely be able to become a carp leaping over the dragon gate. The round-faced girl caught up with her brother's pace. She saw him standing under an ancient banyan tree in a daze, his eyes still staring blankly at a certain place. The round-faced girl's heart was filled with doubts. In the past, she had never seen her brother reveal such an expression. This brother of hers had always been cold and indifferent to people and things. Not to mention that she was only one of his sisters, even in front of his own sister, the most talented little genius in the family, her brother still had this cold and indifferent appearance. Even in front of his own mother, he was also like this. But now, she saw a strange light in his eyes. The round-faced girl looked in that direction curiously and saw that it was the direction of the carriage. However, a level 8 spirit stallion's running speed was still very fast, and at this moment, they could no longer see any traces of the carriage. "Brother, are you still watching?" The girl could not hide the curiosity in her eyes. The man's cold voice rang out. "Rest for half a day. We'll enter the mountain in the afternoon." So, Arbor and Emolien were sitting under a tree and eating barbecued meat. Beside them, 8 young people were jumping up and down, opening talismans to attack the annoying mosquitoes and flies in the forest. This was what eldest young Miss had ordered them to do. To put it nicely, it was to train the speed of opening talismans. They had spent 5 to 6 days drawing these attack talismans. Sobbed that the eldest young Miss also said that drawing talismans required consumption. If you don't consume it, why don't you draw it? However, he felt that the current situation was not quite right. Could it be that their attack talismans were only used to deal with these little mosquitoes? Heartache talisman. Young Miss. All the mosquitoes within a radius of 2 miles have been wiped out. Zhou Huan eagerly turned around and reported. Chapter 23-21. Not bad. Xiao Mu nodded unhurriedly. Let's go roast some meat. Zhou Huan and the others immediately cheered and went to the side to barbecue with the food. When everyone was full and collapsed under the tree while rubbing their bellies, Arbor glanced at them indifferently and said, "Tomorrow morning, everyone will hand in 15 mid-level attack talismans. No problem, right?" "Yes." How could there be no problem? 15 talismans in one night, how on earth should they draw them? No breakfast if you can't draw them. Arbor added another sentence. Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others suddenly wanted to cry. If they had known earlier, they would have secretly hidden a few attack talismans. Why did they have to use them all? The little fellow, who was full, was in a good mood and climbed into the carriage to continue sleeping. Emolien glanced at the 8 people, who looked as if they had lost their parents, and expressionlessly mounted the horse. She said to the coachman, "Let's go." Anyway, her Jojo was not tormenting him. Tormenting this group of brats? He was happy to see it happen. The Ba Huang mountain range is in front. The coachman slowly drove the carriage. This old man can only go to the periphery. It'll take a day and a half. Emolien did not care. Anyway, she was not in a hurry to return to Longyan City. Along the way, he still wanted to take his little wife to eat and play, and go sightseeing all the way back. "Uncle Chen, is the Ba Huang mountain range very scary?" Arbor lifted the carriage curtain with one hand and poked his head out to ask. The coachman shook his head. This old man has never been to the Ba Huang mountain range. Every time I drive the carriage, I take the outer passage. However, I heard that hundreds and thousands of people die in this mountain range every year. Many people from this academy and that sect also come here to train at the beginning of spring. It is said that many people have met with accidents. As they spoke, a few whistles sounded. Suddenly, a pair of shifty-eyed men rushed out from both sides of the mountain road. Without saying anything, they held a ball of fire in their hands and attacked the carriage. Emolien's eyes turned cold. In the old man's exclamation, a curtain of fire suddenly enveloped the carriage. The ball of fire that the shifty-eyed man threw out was instantly extinguished and it came into contact with the curtain of fire. The two of them couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, their expressions changed slightly as they looked at each other. Like burrowing rats, they really jumped into a pit behind the mountain path with a whoosh. How could Mo Yen allow these two people to come and go as they pleased? He directly stretched out his hand, and a scarlet flame fell into the pit with a bang. The two people who couldn't escape in time were immediately hit by the flames and let out two heart-wrenching screams. Rustle, rustle, rustle. From the bushes on both sides of the mountain path, more than 10 people came out one after another, scrambling towards the carriage. Everyone acted as if they didn't care about their lives. Among them, a tall and thin man moved the fastest. He stepped on the shaft of the carriage and reached out to flip the curtain. A crimson flame suddenly landed on his body, setting him on fire. Ah! That person tumbled down from the shaft of the carriage and rolled on the ground, screaming miserably. That terrifying appearance frightened many people for a moment. What are you doing? The little guy lifted the curtain and angrily looked at the dozen strangers. You want to rob us? Rob? Wasn't this obvious? The people who were scared back by Li Hua all stared blankly at the same time. Then, as if they had been injected with chicken blood, they madly jumped back into the carriage. Arbor pursed his small lips and suddenly called out, "Little Snow!" Roar! The snow leopard's enormous figure seemed to have descended from the sky. Chapter 23-22. With a whoosh, the huge figure landed in the middle of the crowd. The snow leopard's claws slapped down a few times, sending the rowdy people flying. Arbor's eyes showed traces of suspicion. He hugged his small arms and looked at the people who didn't care about their lives. What was wrong with these people? They were clearly a group of ordinary people who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. What were they thinking? Why did they have the idea of robbing people? In this group of more than 10 people, only the 2 low-level weak spirit masters could be of use. The others were all ordinary people, right? Arbor's eyes flashed. He squatted at the door of the carriage and looked at the people who were sent flying by the snow leopard. He looked at them suspiciously. They looked very suspicious. Mo Lien looked at the 2 people who crawled out of the pit with black faces in disdain. The horses' hooves flew out and kicked them. Bang! Bang! 2 kicks sent the 2 of them tumbling backward, their faces buried in the ground with a bitter look on their faces. Zhou Huan and the other 8 people took out body-securing talismans and slapped them on the people around them. A battle, from start to finish, definitely didn't take more than 2 minutes. More than 10 crooked people were all strangely fixed in place. They had bitter faces as they wailed. Mo Lien didn't get off her horse. She only waved her horsewhip and pulled up a monkey-like person beside the pit and threw him to the ground. Speak, who sent you? Looking at their mysterious skills, they couldn't have been sent by the palace. Even if his uncles couldn't wait to send people to deal with him, they couldn't have sent these crooked people. Mo Lien couldn't help but have some doubts. Old Man Chen on the side sat back down in fear. He wiped away his sweat and quickly said, "This group of people should be the bandits who occupy the outskirts of the Ba Huang mountain range. They specialize in robbing merchants. If they meet a small training group, or a group from an academy or sect, they wouldn't dare to act recklessly. They usually rob small groups of 4, 5, 7 or 8 people, or trade caravans that people with discerning eyes can tell are very weak at first glance." Mo Lien's expression was a little uncertain. She turned to look at Zhou Huan and the others. "Do I look very weak?" Zhou Huan and the others smiled awkwardly. "How could that be? It's these people who have no foresight." In the end, he kicked a thick iron plate. Arbor jumped off the horse and ran to Mo Lien's side. He bent down and carried her onto the horse. "Who are these weaklings? Are they sure they didn't come here to be a joke?" With such strength, how could he learn how to rob others? He would have been insta-killed in a matter of minutes. Mo Lien gave Zhou Huan a look, and the boys surrounded them. They carried the guy whose face was bruised and swollen from the crown prince's fire, walked over and urged, "Tell us the truth. Who are you people?" "Sirs, please spare my life. We're just a group of refugees who fled to the Ba Huang mountain range because our lives were hard. Because we couldn't live anymore, we had no choice but to do this. Looking at your clothes, you seem to be living a good life. Arbor looked them up and down and said bluntly. The two low-level spiritual masters in the lead were a little embarrassed. Because our luck was good before, and we robbed a few fat sheep. However, their group's long-established good luck came to an abrupt end when they met Arbor and the others. I'm sleepy, I'll read 2 more chapters when I wake up. Chapter 23-23. Thinking of this, the leader seemed a bit depressed. Who did he offend? How did he end up kicking this iron plate? Previously, when they were hiding in the forest, it was clear that they were just a bunch of pretty boys who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Moreover, their team of 8 to 9 people also brought along a carriage. Through his unerring, precise judgment, he deduced that Crown Prince Mo's team was clearly a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Who would have thought that as soon as he made his move, he would realize that things were not as he imagined. Moreover, they were heading towards a very bad situation. Where did you guys escape from? Arbor tilted his head and asked with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Aren't these refugees too bold? With such strength, they still dared to take over the mountain and become a bandit. The nearby cauliflower town. A woman's frozen body stiffened as tears and snot flowed down her face. She looked regretful and sad. Miss, please let us go. We will definitely leave this place in the future and repent for our mistakes. We will never have the thought of robbing again. You can't let us go. An unfamiliar roar sounded. A team of 20 or so people quickly ran out from the back of the mountain path. The leader was a middle-aged man who was very tall and had a very thick beard. At first glance, he looked like a savage who had come out of a primitive forest. Young master, miss, are you guys all right? The bearded man cupped his fist towards Mo Lien and looked her up and down. Seeing that they were fine, he nodded and said, young master probably doesn't know. This group of refugee bandits has been roaming around the outskirts of the Ba Huang mountain range. They have killed and injured more than 10 merchants. I am the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu. I have taken on a mission to clear out the refugees in the southern city. I hope that the young masters and misses can make things easy for me. The bearded middle-aged man cupped his fist again and said with a sincere face, these people are indeed extremely evil. They have killed more than 1 person. No, that's not it. What he said is not true at all. Miss, we're just a bunch of refugees who were forced to flee here. We haven't done anything outrageous. The woman with tears and snot flowing down her face screamed, but she couldn't move at all. When she screamed, the muscles on her face trembled slightly, and her expression was somewhat distorted. This mission can be checked in the Mercenary Guild. This is the truth. I'm not making things up. The bearded man said righteously, if you don't believe me, you can follow us to the mercenary shop when you pass by the southern city. This mission was issued by a merchant in the victim's southern city. Other than our Wind Concealment Mercenary Squad, there are several other mercenary squads of various sizes vying to take on this job. Wang Lu didn't hide anything and told Mo Lien and Xiao Mu in full detail. The vice leader of the mercenary group scratched his head speechlessly. Big Brother was still as honest as ever. He had already said that it was for the sake of the mission, so it was only natural for the other party to ask for some benefits from his mercenary group. After all, this group of refugees was not defeated by their mercenary group. Of course, their mercenary group naturally had the ability to defeat this group of refugees. It was just that they did not meet them first. Arbor blinked and flicked out a silver needle from his finger, silencing the woman's wailing and howling. Noisy. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu, was stunned and looked at the group of refugees. Chapter 23-24. The little girl's movements were very fast. He saw her snap her fingers and the woman's screams disappeared. However, when he arrived, he discovered that the group of refugees were all fixed in place. Their bodies were strangely stiff, and they couldn't move at all. Wang Lu, the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, felt a slight respect for Arbor's group. They were very young, but they were very decisive in their actions. It seemed that they were not a simple group of people. This time, they could only negotiate properly. Wang Lu was a cautious person. Before doing anything, he would always think about his own mercenary group. If it was possible, he didn't want to attract a strong enemy for his brothers because of a wrong decision he had made when he was outside. They were all people who lived on the edge of a knife. Wang Lu cared about his brothers' lives more than anyone else. Gentlemen, ladies. Because we can't accept this mission anymore, so. Wang Lu's implication was that these refugees would not be of much use in Xiao Mu and the others' hands. How about this? Our wind concealment mercenary group will turn in the mission and we'll split the profits 50-50? Wang Lu asked carefully. He was still a little scared. After all, their mercenary group did nothing but accept a mission. They still wanted to split the profits. However, the mercenary group's current situation forced him to put down his old face. His brothers really needed this batch of profits. At least they could get some money to treat Erbao's illness. Arbor nodded his little head. You guys can take them. There's no need to split the profits 50-50. She was so pitiful. She was not someone who needed those things. How much could a team of 20 people get from the mission? If they had to split the profits with them, it wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Wang Lu was stunned when he heard that. He then said emotionally, how can we accept that? If you're embarrassed, then leave the refugees here. Our battle-crazed mercenary group will take them in. No need to be polite. Ah, ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a rough laugh interrupted everyone's conversation. Battle-crazed. The leader of the wind concealment mercenary group, Wang Lu, gritted his teeth and turned his head. His eyes dimmed as he looked at the beautiful woman who was lying in the arms of a man with a scar on his face. Mad Warrior noticed Wang Lu's gaze and deliberately grabbed the woman's waist. His bare arm tightly wrapped around the woman's body as he laughed wildly. Ying, why didn't you say hello to Commander Wang? He's too insensible. The woman called Ying laughed coquettishly. She hung on the man's arm as if her bones were broken. She gave Wang Lu a look of disdain and said in a disdainful tone, Greetings, Commander Wang. Ha ha ha. Berserker laughed heartily and raised his hand. 40-50 of his men rushed forward and tied up the refugees. Take him away. Berserker shouted. Wang Lu's subordinates cursed with bloodshot eyes. Mad Warrior, you despicable man, are you trying to steal our business again? What? You don't like it? Berserker laughed loudly. The scar on his face was ugly and twisted like a centipede. Even if you don't like it, you better hold it in. Berserker raised his eyebrows and snorted. Brothers, take him away. Ow. Chapter 23-25. A ball of light blue pure fire danced slightly in the little girl's hand, looking very transparent and gorgeous. However, it contained traces of power that caused one's heart to tremble. You think too highly of yourself. Miss Xiao scolded sternly. Did I say you could leave? Damn it. What kind of flame was that? Berserker touched his shoulder. The outer layer of his clothes was scorched, but other than that, his body did not suffer any damage. This caused him to be suddenly shocked, but his mood slowly relaxed. Only then did he have time to size up Arbor. With one look, he could not help but be shocked. Although the little girl looked young, in another 1 or 2 years, she would be amazing. She would definitely bloom like a flower in full bloom. Compared to that clean, white, and delicate little face, and then looking at the idiot in his arms with heavy makeup, a strong feeling of disdain emerged from Berserker's heart. Berserker pushed away the spineless woman in his arms and walked a few steps forward with a laugh. He sized up Arbor and said, I, Berserker, was rude just now. I didn't have time to discuss it with the little girl. His centipede scar was distorted from his smile. How about this? Our Berserker mercenary group's base is not far from here in the southern city. Why don't you come back to the base with us and discuss it properly? Let's see if it's 50-50 or 60-40. What do you think? The little girl looked like she was playing with the flame in her hand. It only looked scary on the outside, but when it hit him, it was like scratching an itch. When he got this little girl into his base, Berserker was thinking about the girl wretchedly in his heart when he saw a red-hot flame pounce at his feet. Before he could react, the flame soared and burned around him. Now, the taste of it was truly satisfying. Berserker howled and took a few steps back, but his body was still imprisoned by the circle of flame. He opened up a defensive shield, but he still felt like he was almost a piece of fat pork in the fire, being roasted by the hot flames with sizzling sounds. Arbor lowered her little head and casually played with the little blue ball of fire in her hand. Just now, Prince Mo's furious attack made her feel a little puzzled. At the same time, she looked up at her husband. Disgusting guy, let him die here. Mo Lien's eyes flashed with killing intent. As a man, he naturally understood the wretched light in the scar-faced man's eyes. He actually dared to think about his wife in front of him. His death was not enough to be regretted. Arbor tugged at her sleeve and gently tossed the blue fireball in his hand. The crown prince couldn't help but laugh. With a flick of his sleeve, he retrieved the red flame. He lowered his head to look at her and said softly, "Jojo, you used too little spiritual energy just now." Arbor was expressionless. "Too many. I'll kill them in one hit." Zhou Huan and the others were speechless. Should he sympathize with that idiot from the battle-crazed mercenary group? He actually dared to look down on their young Mississippi. This old fellow was most likely going to be in big trouble. For the first time, Arbor actually held a fireball in his hand. He had a lot of fun playing with fire. A ball of blue flame, accompanied by a gust of wind, bounced onto Berserker's clothes with a whoosh. He. Berserker's face was burned black by Mo Lien's fire. At this time, when he saw the blue flame coming, he hurriedly raised his defensive shield to block it. "You can only take it if I give it to you." Arbor coldly glanced at Berserker. 5, 6, 7, 8 small fireballs continuously appeared between his fingers and whooshed towards Berserker's body. Chapter 23-26. If I don't give it to you, don't even think about getting half a share. Arbor expressionlessly withdrew the little blue fireball in his hand. Do you understand? The Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader finally understood what kind of little fiend he had provoked. This time, he completely understood the power of the little blue fireball. The blue flame directly burned a hole in his defensive barrier. The blue flame covered his skin, and just like the scarlet flame from before, it roasted him until he jumped back and forth and screamed. When the others saw this, they all revealed terrified expressions. How was this possible? Their Berserk battle captain was an 8th-level spirit master who controlled a 5th level of spiritual fire. What the hell was the blue flame in that girl's hand? Why was it able to burn a level 8 spirit master with 5 layers of spiritual fire? Berserk Battle's face was filled with fear. His neck and body were covered in bruises. Looking at Arbor with fear in his eyes, Berserk Battle could not hide the deep fear in his heart. Who the hell are you people? Berserker cried out in fear, trying to put on a brave front. Arbor coldly glanced at him. Who am I? You don't need to know. After saying that, his gaze indifferently shifted to Zhou Huan and the others. The latter immediately understood and went forward to tie up the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader. At this time, the other members of the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group finally reacted and pointed at Zhou Huan and the others, cursing angrily, "What are you doing? Let go of him. Let go of our leader. Quick. Our Berserk Battle Mercenary Group is a 3rd-level mercenary group. You guys can't afford to offend us." Bah! Zhou Huan unceremoniously spat at them and directly stepped forward, pressing the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader to the ground. The other mercenaries of Berserker were furious. Just as they were about to swarm up, Zhou Huan and the other 8 talisman masters made a move at the same time. They nimbly took out a handful of body-securing talismans from their inner worlds and threw them at those people without hesitation. Miss said that when fighting, there was no need to feel sorry for the talismans. The talismans could be drawn again, but if the person was gone, there would be nothing left. They felt that what the eldest young Miss said was extremely correct. Thus, at this moment, when they were fighting against the battle-crazed mercenary group, they no longer felt heartache about the consumption of talismans. You can do whatever you want. After all, Miss has plenty of blank talismans. If he ran out, he could just work through the night and continue painting. The group of crazed battle mercenary band members simply hadn't expected that Zhou Huan's group of 8 were actually all talisman masters. Although the talismans they threw out were all mid-level talismans, and many of them might not be able to freeze people in place at once, but they couldn't withstand so many talismans flying over together. Not everyone in the battle-crazed mercenary group was a spirit realm cultivator. Some mystic cultivators with slightly lower levels were pitifully immobilized under the effects of the immobilization talisman. As a result, at least half of the 20 or so members of the battle-crazed mercenary group were locked down by Zhou Huan's group. The rest of the pitiful sects were swarmed by Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others. They were pressed to the ground and beaten up. After this fat beating, the berserker mercenary group cried out and begged for mercy. Among them, there were 3 stubborn vice-regiment commanders who were the focus of Zhou Huan and the others. The group of talisman masters' cultivation might not be as good as theirs, but they had talismans in their hands. Seeing one of the vice-regiment commanders stiffen his neck and vainly attempt to lead the group members to break out of the encirclement, Qi Hua promptly made a decision to open an attack talisman. Chapter 23-27. There was a flash of light. The attack talisman in Qi Hua's hand slapped the man's head. When the 2 talisman brothers saw this, they quickly threw out a few stun talismans, causing the vice leader to fall to the ground in a daze, completely unable to resist. A few talisman masters swarmed forward again and beat the guy to death. After a while, all the members of the berserker mercenary group had their hands tied behind their backs and were tied to the tree one by one. The woman called Ying had long been scared out of her wits. How would she dare to go forward? She curled up at the side and hugged her knees as she squatted on the ground. Seeing Arbor's cold gaze sweeping towards her, she hurriedly cried out in fear, "Miss, please spare me. Miss, please spare me. I'm a commoner who was forcefully taken back by this berserker mercenary group's leader. I am innocent, miss." "Bitch, what did you say?" The scar-faced man, who was tied to the tree, grimaced in pain as he shouted angrily, "You bitch, if you didn't despise the poor and love the rich, abandon Wang Lu, sneak into my tent, and take off your clothes to seduce me, would I have taken in a trash like you? A shameless old woman, do you think you're a fairy? Why would I want to steal a bitch like you? If I didn't take you in, you would have been sold to a brothel long ago. Shut up." Zhou Huan flew up and gave him a big slap in the face, blocking the guy's mouth full of obscenities. "You're not allowed to talk nonsense in front of Miss." This dog, didn't he see that the crown prince's eyes were sharp? No wonder he could only be a small mercenary group leader for his entire life. He couldn't do anything big and didn't even have the ability to discern. Arbor couldn't be bothered to care about this woman. Seeing her and the berserker mercenary group's leader arguing, he only felt that it was a dog-eat-dog fight. The little guy was expressionless as he glanced at Wang Lu of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group. He pointed to the berserker mercenary group who had been beaten up and asked, "Who are they? What's a third-rank mercenary group?" Wang Lu of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group had long known that this girl was extraordinary. Now that he saw how she dealt with things, he felt even more admiration for her. This group of people looked very young, but once they did, they would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat without any effort. He subdued everyone in the battle-crazed mercenary group. This made Wang Lu of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group even more respectful towards Arbor and the others. "Miss, you may not know this, but in the mercenary world, mercenary groups are ranked according to the size and strength of the mercenary groups, from low to high, and are divided into level 1 to level 7 mercenary groups. The battle-crazed mercenary group can be considered a rather large mercenary group in the southern city. They have over 100 people. Although they can't be compared to those 4th and 5th rank mercenary groups with over 1,000 people, at least in a small city like the southern city, the battle-crazed mercenary group can be considered an existence that can speak for itself. That's right. We still have some brothers left in the city. I advise you to let us go quickly. Otherwise, when I gather all my brothers and come back, I'll peel off your skin. Roar, roar. The heroic spirit that Berserker had just accumulated was slapped by more than 10 consecutive slaps. His cheeks flushed red, and his teeth shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. Berserker stared in horror at the broken teeth that had fallen out of his mouth, his face ashen. Are you tired of living for such filthy words? Mo Lien glanced at him coldly. Chapter 23-28. Quang Zhan shuddered and didn't dare to provoke the man in front of him anymore. He felt that if he said another word, not only would his teeth shatter, but his entire head would also shatter. What about you guys? Arbor wasn't affected by Quang Zhan's words and turned to ask the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu, laughed bitterly. We only have 23 brothers in our group and one of them is still seriously injured. Now, we can only be considered a small second-class mercenary group. Arbor sized up Wang Lu and nodded his little head. He still said expressionlessly, I see that you have a good face. You should have great prospects in the future. Work hard with your brothers and you will be successful one day. Everyone was speechless. Mo Lien's mouth twitched. When did this little guy of hers become a fortune teller? Alright, you guys pack up and take these refugees away. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Corps cupped his hands at Xiao Mu in gratitude. Miss, I can't thank you enough for your great kindness. In the future, if you need me, Wang Lu, for anything, you can come to the southern city to find me. Damn you, you heartless bastard. You actually handed us over to the mercenary group. Are you trying to force us, the weak and powerless refugees, to die? You cursed. Ouch. That shrew started cursing again. But before she could finish cursing, her mouth was stuffed with a ball of mud. She could only stare at Arbor with a pair of eyes that were bulging like dead fish. If they were handed over to the mercenary group and brought back to South City, they would face the fate of being imprisoned and awaiting execution. Arbor cast a cold glance at the shrew. If today, we were just a group of ordinary people, we would be the ones to suffer. So, wasn't this the rule that you guys set? The weak were prey to the strong, and the strong were respected. People had to pay the price for what they did. What was there to be indignant about? The Wind Concealment Mercenary Group left with the group of refugees, leaving behind a group of bitter battle-crazed mercenary group members. When Scarface saw that Hidden Wind's people had all left, he inexplicably became nervous. Just by looking at the way that girl dealt with the refugees, she didn't seem like a soft-hearted person. Would she kill them all? Kill them all? You, what are you doing? Berserker's lips trembled as he looked at the girl who was approaching him step by step. He always felt that there was a storm under her eyes. He wouldn't kill them all, would he? Mad Warrior's heart trembled. Hand it over. Mad Warrior was dumbfounded. What? Arbor raised a small fist and punched him on the left side of his face. Are you going to hand it over or not? The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched as she silently raised her hand to cover her face. Great aunt, hand it over? What do you want us to hand it over? Stop pretending. Arbor felt that the man in front of him was pretending. How could he not know the consequences of losing a robbery? This guy had been pretending from the beginning, and now he still wanted to continue pretending? He was simply asking for a beating. Arbor raised her small fist again and punched Mad Warrior's right face. Hand it over. Mad Warrior really wanted to cry. He really didn't know what this little girl wanted him to hand over. On the other hand, the deputy leader, who was beaten up and had a bloody nose and a swollen face, seemed to have a flash of inspiration as he hurriedly stuttered, "Leader, quick, quick, hand over the resources in your inner world." Chapter 23-29. What? Berserker's face contorted, and his entire jaw almost fell off. You? This guy actually wanted to rob the Berserker mercenary group so matter-of-factly? On what basis? Bam! Arbor received another punch to the jaw and said coldly, "You don't want your eyes anymore?" Berserker wished he could cry. Cough. Mo Lien walked forward with her hands behind her back and stood in front of Berserker. She spoke for Arbor. "Hurry up, don't dawdle." Arbor nodded. That's right. What husband said was exactly what she was too lazy to say. These people were too dawdling. They should have handed over the goods long ago, and then everyone could have counted and distributed them. Berserker silently wept. With a flick of his finger, he suddenly took out a small basket of things from his inner world. Arbor looked back, and her gaze instantly hardened. She ruthlessly kicked the man's lower abdomen, scaring him into screaming. Mo Lien held back her laughter and put on a stern face. "Are you trying to dismiss a beggar?" These words actually sounded a bit familiar. Arbor froze and then turned to look at Berserker, who still had lingering fear. Hand it over, everyone hand it over." Berserker hurriedly took out a lot of things from his inner world. Most of them were pills, spirit stones, and the like. The Berserker mercenary group's members all had bitter expressions as they dug things out of their inner worlds. Among them, 3 mystic cultivators didn't have inner worlds, so they could only use their eyes to signal Zhou Huan and the others to untie them. After rummaging around their bodies for a long time, they finally found some good stuff and handed it over. Arbor looked at the goods piled up into a small mountain on the ground and pursed her lips noncommittally. Poor. Such a pile of scrap metal, there was nothing good that could be brought out. Zhou Huan. Yes. Go divide this pile of junk and bring it all. Arbor waved her small hand. She didn't care about these lousy things at all. Zhou Huan and the others, on the other hand, were overjoyed. They hurriedly sat down and divided the spoils. One by one, everyone was beaming with joy. At this moment, Berserker's tears had already flowed to his stomach. He really didn't check the almanac before leaving the house today. He actually provoked such an ominous star. She hoped that she would never meet this couple again in this life or in her next life. When Arbor saw the Berserker mercenary group's drooping head with a pained expression on his face, he couldn't help but feel a little better. That was good. She was happy to see him unhappy. Well, since the matter here has been settled, let's continue our journey. Mo Lien was secretly amused, but her face did not reveal any clues. Old Man Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the front of the car and said, "If we hurry up, we can reach the next accommodation before dark." "There's no hurry," Mo Lien said calmly. "Jojo, do you want to pick some herbs to bring back?" "There's no need for that." Arbor glanced at the barren herbs nearby. She looked over and saw a low-grade herb growing not far away. It didn't look like a place that would produce any good herbs. The 2 people rode on the same horse. Mo Lien raised his hand to ruffle the strands of the little fellow's disheveled black hair at her temples. "Then let's have Uncle Chen hurry to the lodging point." Arbor nodded and snuggled in Mo Lien's arms. She said calmly, "Don't be afraid. It's fine even if we have to eat and sleep in the open." Actually, she really wasn't that precious. However, Mo Lien had always pampered her, which made her feel a little helpless. Sleep, I'll catch up on it tomorrow morning." Chapter 23-30. Wait. The Battle Berserker mercenary band looked at the people from Arbor who had turned around and left. They couldn't help but howl in their hearts. Brothers, let them go first. Where did these people come from? Does anyone know that they have such a bloody personality? Battle Berserker shook his body. A small rope naturally wouldn't be able to bind a group of spirit masters like them. Unfortunately, the other party had attached spirit power to the rope. The Battle Berserker mercenary band wanted to cry. 2 hours later, the Battle Berserker mercenary band's reinforcements arrived. When they saw the people who came, the Battle Berserker mercenary band's members really cried out. Young Master Chen, Miss Ro-E, help. The people who came were the round-faced girl and her group that had saved Xiaohe in the border town. The man called Young Master Chen had a cold face. He raised his hand and had his subordinates come forward to rescue the Battle Berserker mercenary band. What happened? Because they needed to find a lot of materials on this trip, they had already booked a mercenary band and said that they would meet on the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range. They just didn't expect Battle Berserker to be tied up here. Speaking of which, Battle Berserker mercenary band was one of the top mercenary bands in South City. They didn't know what had happened to make them so miserable. Battle Berserker wiped away the blood on his face and gritted his teeth. We were set up by a group of shameless people. The round-faced girl called Miss Ro-E crossed her arms in front of her chest and glanced at Battle Berserker. Did you take on another mission? You don't look like you're being honest. Battle Berserker's face twitched slightly. He did take on a refugee mission. Since he was going to accompany young Master Chen to search for materials in the 8 desolate mountain range, he might be able to meet the refugees and turn in the mission. But he didn't expect that Battle Berserker's wishful thinking would turn out to be unsatisfactory. Young Master Chen glanced at them coldly and said faintly, "Do you want to rest?" How could they help find materials in this state? Young Master Chen and Miss Ro-E both frowned and sized up the Battle Berserker mercenary band. I'm fine. Young Master Chen and Miss Ro-Ye's time is precious. Let us be on our way. Wild Warrior hurriedly smiled fawningly. What a joke. They had just lost a large amount of resources. If they didn't perform well now and annoyed young Master Chen, wouldn't they be even more unlucky if he didn't give them a single cent? Since Berserker and the others said that it was fine, young Master Chen nodded and led the group towards the outer mountain range. The 8 desolate mountain range was extremely large. It was divided into 3 major regions: the outer region, the central region and the inner region. To be honest, no one had been able to enter the central region for so many years. Occasionally, 1 or 2 teams would enter, but they would use their strength to prove that they wouldn't be able to come out. Therefore, as time passed, even fewer people would go to the central region of the 8 desolate mountain range to throw away their lives. The things that young Master Chen wanted were all located in the outskirts. It was just that the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range had been excessively deforested in recent years. However, he knew that there was a relatively hidden mountain here. If he searched carefully, he could still find a lot of ores, crystals. Ugh! They just reached the mountain peak that young Master Chen had mentioned when they saw a carriage parked there from afar. Chapter 23:31. Beside them sat 10 young men and women, plus an old man. They were sitting around a bonfire, cooking food. They didn't look like a team that came to the Ba Huang mountain range to train. Instead, they looked like they came here to have a picnic. Big brother? Miss Ro-E looked strangely at her brother, who was standing in front of her and couldn't even move his feet. She couldn't help but frown. Why did Big Brother look so strange? Her line of sight followed her brother's gaze and landed on a little girl with a wooden expression. The little girl was wrapped in a furry floral cloak. She held a branch in one hand and was slowly poking at the fire. Her appearance was indeed very exquisite and beautiful, but her brother's personality was cold and unsociable. He was never someone who would be charmed by beauty. Why was he so abnormal today? Ro-E raised her eyes and glanced at the little girl again. Occasionally, sparks would float out from the fire. As soon as they flickered, a slender hand would immediately grab her little claws and rub them in the palm of his hand. Whether it was appearance or bearing, that young master didn't lose to her brother. She hadn't seen such an outstanding man in the divine continent for a long time. Zhou Huan and a group of people surrounded the bonfire and ate a rather fat roe deer as if there was no one else around them. They chattered happily. Delicious, delicious. Roasted deer meat, fat and tender. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect to find a deer on the divine continent. Unlike when they were in Shuntian Prefecture, there weren't many things that could be eaten in the mountains and forests. Many animals and plants had mutated. Just looking at them was disgusting. Would you dare to eat them? They just haven't eaten them yet, Arbor said lightly. This didn't mean that Tian Yun and the others would let go of this fertile continent. Zhou Huan and the others were stunned, but they didn't ask anything. Although the little girl was expressionless, she had already thrown several small animals into the pasture garden on Paradise Planet when everyone was catching the deer. Jojo, drink the soup. Mo Lien smiled and scooped a small bowl of meat soup into her hand. Prince Mo's heart was filled with happiness as he watched her lower her head like a small animal and sip the soup in small mouthfuls. He just liked to feed this little fellow. It would be good to raise it until it was white and plump. She was so soft that he wanted to take a bite out of her. Young Master Chen, Miss Ro Yi, how about we leave first? The one who spoke was Berserker, the leader of the Berserker mercenary group. When he saw the carriage, his eyelids started twitching. When they got closer and realized that it was Arbor's group, they had a bad feeling. Didn't they agree that it would be best if they never met again in this lifetime? How come it hadn't even been 4 hours, and they were already up against this group of fiends? Berserker didn't notice at all that his voice was trembling a little. He looked like a frightened quail that couldn't wait to escape from the jaws of a tiger. Miss Soft Clothes saw Mad Warrior's cowardly look, and she inadvertently glanced at him. She crossed her arms and said, "What's wrong, Mad Warrior? We didn't spend money to get you to come here so that the Berserker mercenary group could idle around and do nothing. Hurry up and bring your brothers to the nearby mountains to help look." Mad Warrior wanted to cry but had no tears. He glanced at young Master Chen, who was pursing his lips and not speaking. Chapter 23:32. Seeing that the other party didn't react, she hastily stammered, young Master Chen, we can actually search in other mountains. This place. Just go if I tell you to. What are you blabbering on about? Miss Ro Yi glared at him with dissatisfaction. It's such a big mountain, how could everything have been dug up by someone else? Big Brother had said that this place was rich in resources. It was just that when Big Brother had come here for his training, his inner world wasn't enough to hold so many things by himself. Therefore, he'd picked a time to bring everyone here. The 8 desolate mountain range was very large, and not all of the outer areas had been explored. Some hidden places were still unexplored. With a bitter expression, Berserker Zhan walked behind Xiao Mu and the others with his cowardly brothers to search for ores everywhere. Arbor's group didn't pay them any attention from beginning to end. They sat around the fire and shared the fresh and delicious deer meat. The broth emitted waves of fragrance in the air, causing Miss Ro Yi to involuntarily gulp. Xiao He. Ah. Miss Ro Yi was at the back of the group, secretly watching Prince Mo in a daze and looking at Miss Qiao with envy. When she heard this, Miss Ro Yi hurriedly took a few steps forward and bowed respectfully to Miss Ro Yi. "Miss, do you have any orders?" Ro Yi's cold face relaxed slightly when she saw her respectful gaze. "I'll go walk around the forest in a bit and bring back some game for you to roast." Xiao He immediately felt a bit uneasy and couldn't help but wipe her hands on her clothes. Ro Yi didn't notice her expression and led the group into the forest. They returned not long after, carrying 2 rabbits and a pheasant in their hands. It looked like they'd had quite a bountiful harvest. However, when they piled these bloody things in front of Miss Ro Yi, she looked like she was about to faint. Ro Yi looked very angry. "Xiao He, you told me that you were proficient in cooking. It wasn't just a lie, was it?" Of course not," it wasn't. Xiao He shook her head like a rattledrum and quickly said, My cooking skills are very, very good. It's just that I can't bear to see these bloody things. Ri was so angry that she couldn't say anything. If a kitchen maid could not bear to see things with blood, then she could only stir-fry vegetables all day long. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that saving this useless woman was simply a waste of time. Ro-yi coldly ordered the two burly men under her to move the prey to the stream and wash them. Then, she brought the food back for Xiao He to cook. Xiao He's cooking skills could be said to be. It was an extremely tragic sight. When the battle-crazed mercenary group returned without any success, they saw Miss Ro-yi staring at a girl in front of her with a dark face, loudly reprimanding and lecturing her. You don't know how to cook. Miss Ro-yi was so angry that she threw the burnt and ugly rabbit on the grill at Xiao He. The rabbit was roasted until it was scalding hot. When it was thrown onto Xiao He's body, it was so hot that she couldn't help but cry out, "Young master, please spare me." She actually rolled towards Miss Ro-yi's brother and stretched out her jade-like arms, about to hug the young master. Miss Ro-yi was so angry that her face turned red. Chapter 23:33. Baby Qiao was chewing on a piece of meat and holding it in her mouth, almost forgetting to swallow it. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh at her little appearance. She raised a hand to rub her little face and said softly, "Eat." Qiao Mu moved her small mouth and swallowed the food, her eyes darting around as she surveyed the lively scene on the other side. Slap. Young Master Chen's expression didn't change at all. With a flick of his sleeve, he swept away Xiao He who had pounced on him. He allowed her to fall heavily on her back next to the pile of charred food. This young Master Chen completely treated her as a piece of trash and didn't even spare her a glance. Miss Ro-yi walked over and slapped her cheek without any trace of politeness. "Lowly servant, what are you thinking? Do you think that you're a celestial immortal? Do you think my big brother would fancy a piece of trash like you? What kind of joke was this? How many of the noble ladies in the capital ran after her brother? Her brother didn't even look at a single one of them. Not to mention a shrew in the countryside. Where did she get the confidence to think that such a cold and noble person like her brother would fancy a foolish woman like her? Why would I save a piece of trash like you with that cheap face of yours? My brother has good taste. No wonder he didn't approve of me taking you in at first sight. You're courting death by causing trouble." Miss Ro-yi felt that her new servant girl was an utter disgrace to her. Without hesitation, she stretched out her leg and kicked Xiao He, sending her rolling on the ground. "You can scram now. Our Mu family can't afford a lowly servant girl like you with ulterior motives." Sir Jojo, who had been watching the show with his mouth agape, was startled when he heard this. The Mu family? She surreptitiously sized up the siblings and happened to see the young master looking at her with a deep gaze. Her gaze seemed to be very infectious. It was bottomless and vast like smoke. Just one glance was enough to make Jojo's heart skip a beat. A strange feeling arose in her heart. It was an unusually strange feeling, just like when she discovered Long Chuyun in the wilderness of the secret realm. A small trace of suspicion arose in her heart. She didn't know why before. But now, she was very certain that this was the attraction of bloodlines. At the same time that she was sizing up Mu Xingchen was also intently sizing her up. When his pitch-black and deep eyes looked at Xiao Mu, he himself could sense that the blood flowing in his veins was clamoring for a surging emotion in his heart. Mo Lien naturally noticed that the little fellow and another man were staring at each other for a long time. Although he didn't know what was going on, he still turned the little fellow's head back protectively. "What's wrong?" Arbor blinked and picked up a piece of deer meat in his hand. He tore a piece and chewed it. "I don't know. It's definitely not a good thing to see someone from the Mu family." Mo Lien was aware of the knot between her and the Mu clan. She couldn't help but laugh. She glanced in the direction of Mu Xingchen and the rest. "Ignore them. Let's set up camp after we finish eating." They had originally wanted to hurry to their accommodation, but Arbor suddenly called for them to stop. Then, they got off the carriage to clean up the crystal mines here. Mo Lien and Arbor discussed for a while and decided to set up camp here to rest for the night. They would continue their journey tomorrow. Anyway, the environment here was good, so they weren't in a hurry to rush to the next stop. Zhou Huan and the rest naturally didn't have any objections. They were a group of boorish men who could eat and live anywhere. Chapter 23-34. Miss, have we met before? Mu Xingchen suddenly asked. The moment he spoke, Zhou Huan and the others laughed shamefully. Damn, I say, this young master, isn't your opening line to strike up a conversation with a lady a bit too old-fashioned? Isn't that so? We don't have to do that anymore. Mu Xingchen didn't pay attention to Zhou Huan and the others' sarcasm. His gaze was still fixed on the back of Arbor's head, and he said with determination, I have a strange feeling about you. Mu Ro E! Exclamation point. TSK, my big brother, you're really something today. The cold-blooded ice heart that hadn't moved for 1,000 years was inexplicably moved by a girl he'd only met once. If news of this spread back to the capital, all the young ladies and young wives would cry themselves to death. Be big brother. Mu Ro E wanted to pinch herself. What the hell was she doing? Why was she stuttering? It was obvious that her brother was the one in the wrong. It wasn't right to run up to a girl and strike up a conversation, especially when there was a covetous fiancé squatting next to her. Big brother, cough, it seems that there are no more ores here. Why don't we go somewhere else? Not only was her stomach full of anger from eating, but her big brother was also acting strangely. Mu Ro E felt very tired. Mu Xingchen stared at Xiao Mu without moving or blinking. Although the young lady had only shown him the back of her head from beginning to end, Mu Xingchen did not know why, but he felt that he could also feel the excitement of the blood flowing through his body when he looked at the back of this little fellow's head. I think I'm familiar with you. Mu Xingchen said. My name is Mu Xingchen. May I know your name? Prince Mo couldn't bear it anymore and returned a cold glare. I'm not familiar with you. Don't pretend to be family halfway. Miss Xiao He, who was lying on the ground, felt that the jealousy in her heart was about to burn her clean. None of these damned men put her, Xiao He, in their eyes. That young Master Chen, from the first time she saw him, had always had a cold face and kept people 1,000 miles away. Just now, he had brushed her aside so coldly, completely treating her as a smear of dirt that would stain his clothes. He had brushed her aside cleanly. She said that his temperament had always been cold, and he did not know what tenderness was. Who would have thought that he would shamelessly chase after a girl, wanting to know her name? The Mu family. That was what the lofty Miss Soft Clothes had said just now. From this, it could be seen that they were truly aristocratic families from the imperial capital. How could she leave so easily? At this moment, Xiao He had crawled to Mu Ro Yi's feet and cried as she hugged her leg and begged for mercy, causing Mu Ro Yi to be extremely annoyed. Mu Ro Yi was currently worrying about her elder brother's matters. How could she have the time to argue with this lowly servant? She directly kicked her away and roared, "Get lost!" He turned his face to the side and looked at his elder brother, Mu Xingchen, with furrowed brows. His elder brother had always been cold, aloof, and arrogant. When had he ever been so persistent and wanted to ask for the name of a young lady? Miss Chiao turned her delicate, snow-white face and expressionlessly looked at Mu Xingchen. I'm not familiar with you. Impossible. Mu Xingchen stubbornly shook his head. Little girl, I can sense that you're different. In the sea of thousands of people and the boundless stars, I can recognize you at a glance. Chapter 23-35. Mu Ro Yi's jaw dropped. She then looked at the burly men around her. Every single one of them was so shocked that their eyeballs seemed to have fallen out of their sockets. Holy shit. Elder brother is really something. Look at these words of love, right? What sea of people? What vast stars! What can I recognize you at a glance? These words of love were endless. No wonder the face of the guy beside the little girl darkened. It was indeed unbearable, wasn't it? How can you speak so carelessly in front of someone else's lover? Elder brother, I can't help you anymore. With a stoic face, our dear Xiao Mu sized up Mu Xingqian from head to toe. Scram! Everyone, Brave warrior. She was the only one who dared to shout at the genius young master of a talisman family in China. Mu Ro Yi twitched her mouth, and it was only now that she carefully examined Xiao Mu from head to toe again. Little sister, throw it. Who's your little sister? Arbor's cold face met Mu Ro Yi's warm face with a warm smile. The latter's expression stiffened. She coughed lightly and said, little, cough, little girl. Actually, my elder brother doesn't mean any harm. He. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Holy shit, what kind of person is this? Why did he throw blue fireballs without saying anything? Mu Ro Yi's eyes twitched when she saw the fireballs being thrown over. Don't go overboard. You're going overboard, little girl, you're going overboard. Fuck. 17 or 18 small fireballs whizzed over and smashed towards her and her elder brother's faces without any explanation. Damn it, don't hit people's faces. Mu Ro Yi immediately flicked out 2 defensive talismans to protect herself. On the other side, her elder brother's expression was as calm as the wind and clouds. There was even a hair-raising smile hanging at the corner of his mouth. He gently took out a talisman and blocked in front of the fireballs. Bam, bam, bam. The blue fireballs landed outside the defensive circle one after another. She thought that her elder brother's yellow-leveled defensive talisman would be able to block the fireballs. Who knew? Mu Ro Yi opened her mouth and quickly retreated a few steps. She cowardly hid behind her elder brother. When he looked up, he saw his elder brother waving his sleeves and extinguishing the small fireballs that had broken through his defense. Mu Ro Yi didn't say anything, but she was cursing in her heart. This damned girl was really fucking serious. The small fireball that she threw out was actually able to break through the yellow-gray defensive talisman circle. If she hadn't made the prompt decision to hide behind Big Brother, she reckoned that she would have been injured by now. Stinky girl. Mu Ro Yi jumped up with her hands on her hips. However, before he could start cursing, he saw the other party's actions and his eyes bulged. What the fuck, you're still doing it? Little meteor shower. Arbor's merciless change in attitude was truly intoxicating. Zhou Huan and the others, who were originally sitting beside her and eating barbecue, quickly jumped up and retreated with the food in their hands. On the other end, Miss Qiao had already leaped up. The black light of the ferrule in her hand flowed as she shouted. Hundreds and thousands of little blue fireballs smashed towards Mu Xingqian and Mu Ruoyi. Mu Ro Yi really wanted to cry. She had never seen a girl like this in her entire life. Who would start a fight with you for no reason without saying anything? Furthermore, this mysterious strength of hers seemed a little frightening. Mu Ro Yi turned around and saw the battle-crazed mercenary group hiding behind a row of trees. Only half of their heads were sticking out as they vigilantly looked over. Chapter 2336. The group of bastards from the Berserk Battle mercenary group were more than 10 meters away from the siblings. He had already found a place to hide and was prepared to avoid the attack. This bunch of useless bastards. Mu Ro Yi was furious. In the next second, she abandoned her big brother and ran away in a panic. She kept muttering, "Big brother. Don't force yourself." Mu Xingqian looked expressionlessly at the pile of small blue fireballs that were flying towards him. A jade talisman array appeared around his body. 24 pieces of jade talismans formed a yellow-level defensive talisman array, and it suddenly lit up beside him. Abundant talisman power enveloped his entire body. In an instant, his tall and straight figure appeared exceptionally tall, handsome, and otherworldly in the world. Bang 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 bang. After a round of wild explosions, the man stood in the defensive array and looked at Arbor with a calm expression. His eyes dimmed a little. He didn't know what he was feeling, but he was a little depressed. He had been cold to people since he was young. He thought that his personality was like this, but today, he inexplicably felt that he almost couldn't recognize himself. Could it be that he wasn't a cold-hearted person? Arbor glared at Mu Xingqian angrily. Why didn't it even hit the corner of his clothes? Great meteor shower. Everyone, dot. Too much. Too much, little girl. Little girl. Mu Ro-yi, who was hiding behind the tree, was like the group of bastards from the Berserk Battle Mercenary group. She only stuck her head out from behind the tree, stretched out her fingers, and shouted anxiously. Zhou Huan and the others were speechless. Could it be that the name of the eldest Miss Spiritual Technique was from a book, or did she just casually make it up? Why did it sound so weird? Mo Lian's mouth twitched, but she knew her little wife very well. This was definitely not the original Spiritual Technique name. It was just that the little guy had made up a small meteor to make it easier to distinguish. Qi Hua and the others' jaws dropped. When they looked up and saw the large meteor shower, they, who were in the same camp, couldn't help but take dozens of steps back. Holy shit, young miss is too fierce. Every ball of blue fire in this large meteor shower was the size of a wash basin. Compared to the small meteor shower he had played with before, it was much stronger. Don't. Let's talk nicely. Young lady. Mu Ro-yi jumped out from behind the tree, but in less than 3 seconds, she hurriedly moved back more than 10 meters to avoid the incoming heat wave. Fuck, this temperamental grandaunt is getting serious. Crackle, crackle, crackle. A flaming meteor instantly broke through the defensive array glyphs, and a large number of fireballs smashed towards Mu Xingqian. In the nick of time, Mu Xingqian brandished a long sword in his hand and slashed forward with a heat wave. He had already moved out along the path that had been opened up. The entire large meteor shower instantly smashed into the air, directly smashing a deep crater in the ground. The commotion caused the beasts on the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range to roar in fear. Arbor blinked and lowered his head to look at his little hand. He was a little dazed and cute. It didn't hit? Mu Xingqian isn't just a yellow-level great talisman master, his cultivation is also far above yours. It's impossible for someone who controls 9 levels of spiritual fire to be hurt by the blue spiritual cleansing flame. As expected, he was a genius. No wonder old Bai, who was by Mu Jingrui's side, was so fanatical in protecting their young master. It was time to sleep. Chapter 2337. Was she a genius with extraordinary talent? If that was the case. Arbor's gaze turned cold. With a flick of his finger, dozens of 8 trigrams binding talismans flew up and rushed toward Mu Xingqian. At the same time, attack talismans and 5 spirit talismans followed suit. It was as if they were going to smash Mu Xingqian to death. A stream of wind appeared in the little girl's hand, and she pounced in front of Mu Xingqian without any warning. The 3 lightning spirit talismans in her hand had already descended from the sky and were smashing down fiercely. The battle-crazed mercenary group was on the verge of collapse. If they had to use a word to describe their current feelings, it would probably be the feeling of 10,000 heads running through their hearts. Lightning spirit talisman. 5 spirit talisman. What talisman is that? Mu Ro-yi had already come out from behind the tree. Her mouth was agape as she stared at the girl who was about the same age as her in shock. What was going on? An unfamiliar girl's talisman skills were actually more outstanding than all the young disciples of the talisman patrician family? Could it be that she was still dreaming? Was what she was seeing not real? However, seeing that her elder brother was temporarily unable to break free from the effects of the 8 trigrams binding talismans, Mu Rouyi's eyes truly flashed with a trace of uncertainty. Elder brother. Super large meteor shower. Miss Qiao leapt high into the air. She was already floating in the air as she looked down expressionlessly. The ferrule, which was connected to her mind, came out from under her sleeve with a whoosh and went straight for Mu Xingqian's head. No! Mu Rouyi's pupils shrank as she screamed. Mo Lien. Zhou Huan and the others' jaws once again dropped to the ground. They thought that the great meteor shower was the ultimate move that eldest miss could use at the moment. But they didn't expect that there was actually a super meteor shower in this world, that they really knelt down before eldest miss. Was she really a human and not a demon? Mu Xingqian was temporarily immobilized by 4 or 5 8 trigrams binding talismans. When he looked up, he saw bursts of lightning accompanied by dark clouds and a large fiery meteor shower smashing down on top of his head. Time seemed to have stopped. Everyone was filled with trepidation and cold sweat, waiting for the arrival of the thunder fire. However, all of the attacks stopped in that instant. The thick flaming meteor nebula covered the sky above Mu Xingqian's head. It stopped. The little girl looked down coldly at the man who was standing still under the encirclement of attack talismans. There wasn't the slightest fluctuation in her eyes as she just looked at him coldly. Step by step, he walked up to him and asked coldly, "Why aren't you fighting back?" "I don't want to." This inexplicable feeling of bloodline resonance made him particularly reluctant to attack her. Not at all. He did not want to hurt her, not even the slightest bit. Mu Xingqian frowned slightly. Arbor glanced at him coldly and leaned in a few inches. She stared into his dark and still eyes and said word by word, "Mu clan, you better not provoke me again. Otherwise, when I get angry, I'll turn your entire Mu clan upside down, make you wish you were dead. Remember what I said today." Arbor glanced at him coldly. "I hope that day doesn't come. Miss, may I know your name?" "Not a single person from the Mu clan deserves to know my name." Chapter 23:38. Arbor coldly turned his head and glanced at him. With a light wave of her hand, she removed all of the talismans on Mu Xingqian's body. The meteor shower above their heads also slowly dissipated, leaving only a trace of terrifying pressure in the air, proving that everything just now was not a dream. "Mississippi. How did the Mu family offend you? Can you tell me?" "Elder brother." Mu Rouyi was about to go crazy from anxiety. Elder brother's persistence today seemed very unusual. He clearly knew that the girl did not like the Mu family, but he still kept pestering her. Arbor's cold gaze shot behind him. Scram! The little white snake on his wrist flew out and rolled in the sky in an instant, turning into a ferocious giant snake bigger than a mountain range. Its tail swept down, and there was a loud boom. Half of the mountain top here was shocked by the terrifying vibrations. The little spirit beasts in the forest all hugged their heads and screamed, trembling as they knelt on the ground. The terrifying pressure of the ancient great void serpent shrouded the entire mountain top. Which spirit beast dared to act rashly? Mu Rouyi was so shocked that she fell on her butt. Looking back, Quang Zhan and the other men were already crouching on the ground in fright. Their eyes were filled with terror as they stared in front of them. The giant snake coiled its huge body and floated in the air. Its long tail gently wrapped around the girl. In front of such a giant snake, she was so small that she could be ignored. However, it was this girl with an emotionless expression who was coldly looking at all of them from across a deep ravine. Gully. The giant snake's tail had directly carved out a huge, bottomless crack from left to right on this perfectly fine hillside. If any of them accidentally fell, they would not be able to cry even if they wanted to. Mo Lien slowly walked up and lowered his head to look at that deep crevice. He then raised his head to look at the bewildered Mu Xingqian before letting out a long sigh. The gap between Jojo and the Mu family was like a ravine in front of them. The conflict was so deep that it was impossible to cross it. Mu Xingqian didn't know why, but when he looked at the little girl's emotionless face and her eyes that were as cold as 1,000 years of frost, his heart felt extremely uncomfortable. "You can leave now," Mo Lien said to Mu Xingchen. She stepped forward and gently held Arbor's bone-chilling hand. A warm stream of energy flowed from his palm to hers. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and looked at Qin Lai's eyes, which were as dark as night. "Do you want to eat osmanthus candy?" Mo Lien took out a small, square silver box and gently waved it in front of her. "I'm not a child," Arbor mumbled and stuffed a small piece of osmanthus candy into her mouth. "How is it?" "Not bad, right?" Mo Lien smiled and held her little hand. Then, she turned and walked towards Zhou Huan and the others, who were frozen stiff. The giant snake's cold gaze fell on Mu Xingchen for a moment. Then, it turned into a little white snake and flew up to Arbor's wrist again. "Sweet." The little girl wrinkled her little nose. Mo Lien reached out and poked her little face. "Of course it's sweet. Because when I made this osmanthus candy, I wrapped all my blessings in it." Chapter 2339. Arbor stared blankly for a moment before looking up at him. "You made this?" "Yes." Mo Lien nodded with a smile. "Jojo gave me a pot of flowers, so I naturally had to return the favor." Arbor pursed his lips and silently reached out his little paw to take the small silver box from his father's hand. He expressionlessly stuffed it into his little waist pouch. Mo Lien burst into laughter and suddenly picked up the little fellow. "Jojo, are you happy?" "I'm all right." Arbor nodded his little head and gave him a lively look. Mo Lien laughed heartily, picked up the little fellow, and ran into the depths of the forest. "We'll set up camp here tonight." What he didn't say was that his little emperor had made such a big commotion earlier, so he was sure that no spirit or profound beast would dare to come to their camp to die at night. Phew. Zhou Huan and the others let out a long sigh of relief. It was only now that they came back to their senses. When eldest Miss was angry earlier, they all felt as if there was a heavy aura pressing down on their hearts, causing them to keep quiet out of fear. They didn't even dare to utter a single word. It was only now that they felt a trace of the warmth of spring and the blooming of flowers. Looking at the giant snake that suddenly appeared, its aura was so strong that they had never seen or heard of it before. It was only now that they understood that they had only seen 1,000th of eldest Miss's methods. Mu Roi finally collected her emotions and walked towards her brother, Mu Xingchen, who was standing there in a daze. She lightly coughed and said, Big brother, big brother." Mu Xingchen suddenly turned his head and said to her, "Roi, take them and continue to look for those ores in the 8 desolate mountain range. I'm going home first." "Ah. Big brother, you. Mu Roi opened her small mouth and was about to ask her brother why he was going back, but she saw that Mu Xingchen had already summoned his flying beast, Zhang Shui, a divine beast, 6-winged blood lion. He turned around and quickly flew into the sky. Big brother. Big brother. Mu Roi looked at the sky in shock. After a while, her small face fell. What elder brother did today was really too illogical. She raised her eyes and looked at the deep trench in front of everyone. She let out a long sigh, turned around, and decisively led the Berserker mercenary group and the Mu family away. If that young lady was serious, none of them would be able to leave this place alive. The night passed in silence. In the middle of the night, Arbor hid in Paradise Planet. He drew a lot of talismans and cultivated for a while. Then, he returned to his tent, feeling refreshed. At this time, the first glimmer of dawn had already appeared. A familiar aroma of porridge slowly drifted into her tent and lingered in her nose. Arbor reached out and lifted the curtain. Under the morning light, she saw a man dressed in a plain robe. He seemed to have sensed her presence and turned his head. A hint of gentleness flashed across his face as he reached out and beckoned to her. Her lotus. Miss Chiao's eyes lit up. She shuttled forward like a little butterfly and threw herself into his embrace. She rubbed her little face against his clothes and suddenly raised her little head. She stared at him with sparkling eyes and said, "You didn't wipe your face. It stinks." Mo Lien was about to laugh out loud, and he leaned over to kiss her small face. "Who told you to be my wife? I can despise anyone, but I can't despise you." Arbor grinned and reached out a pair of small hands to hang on him. She rubbed against him for a while. "I'll rub you together. It stinks." Chapter 2340. After breakfast, Old Man Chen ate and drank to his heart's content. With a face full of joy, he continued his journey towards the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range. Their next stop was naturally the southern part of the city. If they hadn't encountered an incident like yesterday, they would have probably reached the southern part of the city by dusk. Old Man Chen was a shrewd person. At this time, he understood that the young masters and young misses accompanying them were not simple people. He only needed to focus on driving the carriage. As for the rest, he would naturally leave it to the young masters and young misses. Arbor sat in the carriage and flipped through the medical book for a while before putting it away. She lifted the curtain and poked her head out. "Husband." Mo Lien slightly tightened his grip on the reins and turned to look at her. "There." Mo Lien turned to look and saw a stalk of medicinal herb growing under a banyan tree. It looked to be in good condition. "Okay." Arbor watched as he whipped the horse forward and straightforwardly picked up the medicinal herb and handed it to her. Miss Chiao blinked and gave him a sweet smile that she didn't even notice. The beautiful smile on her palm-sized face instantly captivated Prince Mo's eyes. "Husband, why do you keep looking at me? Jojo is good-looking." Mo Lien wanted to abandon the horse and get on the carriage. However, when he thought about how his little wife could order him to pick the medicinal herb at any time, he extinguished that strong urge. "Husband, I'm going to sleep for a while." "Okay. I'll call you when it's time for lunch." The two of them looked at each other. Seeing the little fellow's sticky eyes, Mo Lien couldn't help but raise his hand to touch her little face. "Woo, I really want to hug her and keep her in my arms. Forget it, I'll let the little fellow sleep for a while." Arbor retracted her little neck. Just as she was about to close her eyes and rest, she suddenly felt a golden flash in her conscious. The little fellow, who was familiar with the routine, couldn't help but feel happy. Looking at this situation, it seemed that the golden talisman jade tome was about to release a new technique. Could it be that her diligent practice of drawing talismans had some results? Could she now learn the contents of the 9th jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome? She was very happy as she waited for the golden talisman jade tome to release a new jade slip so that she could learn the earth grade talisman technique. Suddenly, a talisman flew out of nowhere. Miss Chiao glanced at it. The talismans that could be stored in her inner world were naturally drawn by her own hands. Of course, she only needed a glance to recognize this soul-departing talisman. However, why would it fly out of its inner world on its own today? Arbor was gathering a strand of his spiritual sense, intending to control his lazy spiritual sense avatar to check on the golden talisman jade tome in his conscious. Suddenly, a blue light burst out in front of him. That inexplicable and strange soul-leaving talisman suddenly rushed towards her glabella. Arbor was too shocked to react. The soul-departing talisman was a talisman that allowed the soul to leave the body and speed up the cultivation of the soul sense. The problem was, why did this soul separation talisman suddenly appear at this time? A talisman force rushed into her glabella without any explanation. Arbor's eyes were filled with shock as she realized that she was drifting away from her body, pulled out by an indescribably tyrannical force. Bang! The body and the carriage fell to the ground without any reaction. Arbor's soul thought brushed past Prince Mo, who was galloping over on his horse. Prince Mo suddenly pulled on the reins of his horse and looked in the direction where Arbor was drifting away. There was nothing at all. He lifted the curtain of the carriage. What happened to Jojo? Chapter 23:41. Jojo? Mo Lien immediately realized that something was wrong with the little fellow. Although this little fellow's sleeping posture was not good, she would not be sprawled out in the middle of the carriage like this. Jojo, Jojo. Mo Lien leaped onto the carriage and hugged her to his chest. He lowered his head and called her name over and over again. After a long while, he did not see any reaction from his little wife. Mo Lien's heart started to panic. He hugged her and shook her gently. Jojo? What was going on? He checked and found that Jojo's body was very normal. Her breathing was also very calm. However, she did not open her eyes. It was as if she had completely blocked out his voice. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the vine in his hand. After waiting for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, Mo Lien pulled open the curtain and shouted at Old Chen in panic, Go to the clinic. Go to the nearest clinic. Hurry. What happened, young master? Zhou Huan and the rest hurried over and asked with a serious expression. Jojo? Mo Lien lowered his head and looked at the unresponsive arbor. He was inexplicably flustered. In an instant, all his calmness disappeared. Is eldest miss sick? Zhou Huan asked loudly. Then what are we waiting for? Young master, why don't you take the flying beast back to the city? Previously, the young master had not been in a hurry, so he had accompanied the little lady on a scenic tour back to the capital. However, now that something like this had happened, he naturally had to hurry back to the city. They all knew that besides eldest Mrs. Ancient Fire Phoenix, the young master's flying beast was not simple either. Her words woke him up from his dream. Mo Lien's heart was in a complete mess. When he heard Zhou Huan's reminder, he hurriedly carried the warm and soft Jojo and jumped off the carriage. He waved his hand and called 7th Yen out. Everyone leaped onto the golden dragon 7th Yen's back. The golden dragon waved its tail in the air and flew into the sky in an instant. It really only took a breath. Old Chen then disappeared from the sight of the young masters. Old Chen was quite helpless. Looking at the empty carriage, he muttered to himself, that old man is now going back to the border town? Or should we go back? When the sky above the southern city was enveloped by the might of an ancient dragon, the guards of the South City, as well as the officials of the entire South City, all ran out of their mansions with shocked expressions on their faces. The golden dragon was flying so high that they couldn't see the people on it. They could only vaguely see that there was more than one person on the golden dragon's back. No, I don't know which senior was passing by. My little South City, please accept my respect, is willing to listen to your Excellency's orders. A civil official from the southern city trembled as he walked to the front row and said respectfully under the threatening gaze of the guard. A cold and anxious voice passed through the layers of clouds and pressed heavily on the hearts of all the officials. Within 15 minutes, gather all the local pill refiners, doctors, and pharmacists. Have them all come to the Yunheng Inn. He didn't have the time to waste on people. After he finished speaking, he carried Arbor to the Yunheng Inn where they were staying. The guards of the southern city immediately gathered the best doctors in the city and rushed to the inn together. Mo Lien held Xiao Mu's small hand and called out to her with knitted brows for a while. Then, with a gloomy face, he abruptly pulled open the door and glared at the crowd of physicians of all ages outside. Come in, all of you. See what's going on. Chapter 23:42. Yes, yes, yes. The group of physicians hurried forward submissively and checked Miss Chiao's pulse. Then, they all looked at each other in bewilderment. This young lady's pulse is healthy and strong. Her body is very healthy. Then why isn't she waking up from her coma? Mo Lien roared. Zhou Huan and the others, who were standing at the door, couldn't help but shudder. Are all the physicians in South City here? Is there anyone better? The group of physicians suddenly wanted to cry but had no tears. Although Southern City was not big, the top few doctors in Southern City were also famous all over the world. Now, this handsome man in front of them had a terrifying expression, as if he had swallowed a meteor. It was as if they couldn't explain themselves, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to walk out of this inn. You bunch of quacks. If you can't cure me, Jojo, I'll decapitate all of you. Bang! The door was suddenly pushed open forcefully. Fong Su's wooden face suddenly appeared at the door with a trace of pleasant surprise on his face. This General Fong Su greets Your Highness the Crown Prince. Great, His Highness really came back as expected. He didn't stay in South City for so long in vain. He could finally return to the imperial capital and report to His Majesty the Emperor. Pa! One of the physicians was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground, the medicine in his hands spilling onto the ground. The person in front of them was actually His Highness the Crown Prince. Fong Su. Immediately go and gather all the talisman masters near South City. And talisman masters. At this moment, Mo Lien suddenly remembered the soul exchange talisman that Jojo had mentioned before. His heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He inexplicably felt that Jojo's current situation should be related to that strange talisman technique. Talisman masters? Hadn't talisman masters disappeared from the divine continent for hundreds of years? Occasionally, the charm masters who were exposed would also be arrested and sentenced to death. Wasn't His Highness the Crown Prince making things difficult for him? Where could he find those troublesome talisman masters? What are you standing there for? Hurry and go. At Crown Prince Mo's roar, Fong Su immediately ran outside on all fours. How could the group of soldiers dare to continue staying here and endure this temperamental Crown Prince's torrential anger? They hurriedly turned around and ran after Fong Su. After Fong Su led the group of soldiers away, Mo Lien's cold gaze once again fell on the leading doctor from South City. What are you all standing there for? Continue the treatment. If you can't find a way, then think of a plan overnight. All the doctors were speechless. While Prince Mo was going crazy, Miss Qiao pitifully watched as the Crown Prince brushed past her. She stretched out her two slender arms and grabbed nothing but air around the Crown Prince's neck. That's right, I'm just a soul right now. Even my connection with the sapling has been cut off. Lotus must be worried to death after discovering her abnormality, but she didn't even have the ability to send him a message. It's all because of that damned soul-departing talisman. Ow wow. Why did it fly out on its own? Why did it so coincidentally activate the talisman in front of her? Was it because of the golden talisman jade tome? Wasn't it? Arbor silently swallowed her bitterness and pitifully watched herself wander under the boundless sky like a wandering soul. Wandering from day to night, this feeling evoked an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if, a long, long time ago, she had also wandered like this. On the first day of wandering, Jojo missed Mo Lien. On the second day of wandering, Jojo still missed Mo Lien. Chapter 2343. The Mu family of the Divine Land was a talisman family. The talisman family was located in a green mountain forest. The surrounding mountains were the cultivation places of the Mu family. If one looked down from the sky, they would find that the whole talisman family was roughly divided into 4 areas like a large courtyard house. The south was the cultivation area, and the north was the meeting hall. The east was the rest area, and the west was a special elixir room for alchemists. On the Divine Land, almost every big family would pay attention to cultivating alchemists in the family since 100 years ago. These alchemists were naturally important to the family. The pills they developed might one day allow their entire family to rise to a whole new level. Therefore, alchemists always had a high status in the family. A group of disciples who were training their tendons and veins in the southern square suddenly heard a roar in the air and raised their heads one after another. Half of the disciples cheered when they saw him. Young Master is back. Young Master is back so early? Didn't they say that the task of collecting ores in the Ba Huang mountain range would take a long time? In the discussion of the disciples, Mu Xingchen put away the six-winged blood lion with a cold face, waved his sleeves, and swept past the crowd. Why is young master in such a hurry? I don't know. It seems that he is going in the direction of the Gilded Garden to find Madame. Passing through the veranda of the Gilded Garden, Mu Xingchen came to the front of the main hall and saw a pair of calligraphy couplets. The courtyard is full of elegant pavilions, and Xiao Yu is Gu Qingqiu. These words were written by his father, and they were like him. They were arrogant and freehand. Mu Qingya was sitting in the central room. When she heard the news that her eldest son was back, she couldn't sit still and quickly stood up. As soon as she went to the door, she saw Mu Xingchen stride in. Mother. Mu Xingchen stopped and bowed slightly. Mu Qingya looked like she was in her 30s. Her face was gentle and soft, and there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes all year round. When she saw her eldest son, there was a bit of joy in her eyes. Her voice was also soft and soft. Chen, didn't you say that this trip will take more than a month? You are back so soon. Do you want to give me a surprise? Mu Xingchen said respectfully, it's my fault for making mother worry. I encountered some matters and had some doubts, so I traveled day and night to come back and see mother. Chen, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll tell you everything I know. Mu Qingya stepped forward and took her son's hand. She smiled and sat down with him on the carved string chair. Mother, you mentioned to me before that when that person left the Mu family, she was 3 months pregnant? Mu Qingya nodded affirmatively. Yes, I did. Chen, why are you suddenly asking about this? She lowered her eyes and let out a long sigh. When your biological mother broke up with your father and left the Mu family, you were only 5 years old. Sigh, this has always been a regret in my heart. For the sake of the Long family, big sister Yun actually. Sigh. Mu Qingya saw that Mu Xingchen did not pursue the matter, so she said, Child, if you have any questions, you can ask mother. Mother will tell you everything she knows. But what you did to your mother? No. Mu Xingchen interrupted Mu Qingya and coldly said, I don't want to know everything about her. Chapter 23:44. You silly child. Mu Qingya patted his hand unhappily. I've been telling you this all this time. I've been telling you that your birth mother must have her own reasons for abandoning you. Anyone can blame him, you can't blame her. That's your biological mother. Child, this blood relationship can't be cut off. You might not have any recollection of it, but I can tell you with certainty that before your birth mother left the Mu family, she loved and cherished you. Her love for you is definitely not any less than mother's love for you. Mother, Mu Xingchen interrupted her coldly, his eyes cold and aloof. Okay. I won't say anything else. Mu Qingya sighed and looked at him worriedly. You've grown up now and have your own thoughts and plans. But I want to tell you one thing. No matter how old you are, you're still my child. There are some things you don't like to hear, but I still hope you can listen to them. I understand, mother. Mu Xingchen nodded lightly. Mu Qingya asked again, Good child, why did you suddenly mention that she's 3 months pregnant? Mother, 2 days ago, in the 8 desolate mountain range, I met a girl about Ro Yi's age, Mu Xingchen hurriedly said. Mu Xingchen hurriedly said, the moment I saw her, my bloodline involuntarily resonated with her. What? Mu Qingya widened her eyes in shock, then a hint of joy appeared on her face. You mean? Yes. Mu Xingchen nodded with certainty. I suspect that she's my biological sister. It's that woman who took the child away from the Mu family. Mu Qingya jumped up from the bench and said excitedly, This matter is too important. I am going to tell your father now. Wait, mother. Mu Xingchen also stood up and grabbed Mu Qingya's sleeve. Let's talk about this later. There's no rush. How can there be no rush? Mu Qingya said anxiously. Do you know that even your grandfather sends your seventh uncle everywhere to look for this child all year round? I didn't expect that she would come here by herself. You really saw your sister with your own eyes? Mu Qingya's eyes lit up as she looked at Mu Xingchen, the gloominess in her eyes instantly disappearing. Yes. Mu Xingchen could feel his mother's joy, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. She's very beautiful. I've never seen such a cute girl before. She's also very powerful. Mu Xingchen looked at Mu Qingya. Mother, shall we bring her back? Good, good, good. Good, good, good. Mu Qingya nodded repeatedly, and she couldn't help but tear up a little. Your grandfather will be overjoyed when he hears this news. Let's go and talk to your father. When your grandfather comes out of seclusion, tell him the good news. The fondness in Mu Xingchen's eyes dimmed slightly. Mother, what if she hates us? How come? Mu Qingya was shocked and hurriedly turned to look at her son. Son, did something happen? A hint of hatred surged in Mu Xingchen's eyes. It must be that woman. It's her. She was the one who taught my sister to hate us. It must be her. It can't be, it can't be. Mu Qingya hurriedly waved her hands in denial. You must have misunderstood your biological mother. Chapter 23:45. Child, listen to mother. Your biological mother is a straightforward and magnanimous person. She definitely wouldn't teach your sister this, Mu Qingya said with certainty. No matter how great her hatred for our Mu family is, she won't blame her on your sister. She won't transfer this hatred to your sister and let her bear all of this. Mother, don't put in a good word for her anymore. All these years, I've seen clearly and know what kind of person she is. Mu Xingchen sneered. You. Mu Qingya was so angry that she stomped her feet and sat down heavily with a sulk. Mu Xingchen turned and bowed to her. Mother, my sister holds a deep grudge against our Mu family. Don't tell father and grandfather about this for now. We'll talk about it after I find her. Mu Qingya turned and glared at her son. How can we do that? Your father must know about such an important matter. Let's put off your grandfather's matter for now. All right then. I'll have to trouble you with this matter. Mu Qingya sighed and stared faintly at the tall and handsome young man in front of her. Come here. Mu Xingchen walked over and sat down in front of Mu Qingya. Mu Qingya pursed her lips and reached out to hold his hand. I raised you single-handedly, so I know what kind of person you are. You're a good child. It'd be even better if you could let go of your resentment against your biological mother. I don't blame her. It was just that she didn't deserve any of his attention. To him, the woman who had abandoned his son when he was young was nothing more than a stranger in the past. But now, because of his sister's hatred for the Mu family, he had no choice but to face that vicious woman head-on. If it weren't for her teaching, how could his sister harbor such great enmity against the Mu family? Mu Qingya knew that this child had a deep grudge against Long Chuyun, and it wasn't a problem that could be solved with just a few words. She could only subtly talk about Long Chuyun in hopes of alleviating the child's hatred for his biological mother. Mother, I plan to spend some time by her side until she's willing to come home with me. What do you think? Mu Qingya looked at the child she had raised with a gentle gaze. She nodded and said, she's your biological sister, so of course you have to bring her back. If she's not willing, you can spend 1 day, 10 days, or even 100 days to let her know that you truly like her. Let her feel your kindness. Mu Xingchen's lips curled into a faint smile. Mother, I think so too. I'll talk to your father about this. Just do whatever you want to do. I'll support you. Thank you, Mother. Silly child, there's no need to thank me. Mu Qingya smiled. Then I'll go back and prepare. I'll bid farewell to Mother for today. After a while, I'll definitely bring sister to see you. Okay. Mu Qingya's eyes were full of smiles as she nodded and watched the young man leave. "Madam, how can you bear to let eldest young master leave just like that?" A young maidservant at the side puffed up her cheeks and said, "Eldest young master is our Mu family's young master." Just now, his words clearly showed that the girl didn't like him very much. If we let eldest young master go to that young lady's side, wouldn't he suffer all kinds of grievances? What do you know? Mu Qingya glared at her in annoyance. How can the kinship between siblings be broken up by a few words of scolding and beating? I believe that Chen will definitely bring little sister back. Chapter 2346. A neat woman in a green flowery coat walked in and smiled. "Song Lu, don't you know our madam? Anything that can make eldest young master happy, she will raise her hand in approval." Mu Qingya glanced at her with a smile. "How's the shop?" "Madam, don't worry. It's just a small matter. Kaidai Veranda's business is as good as ever. We've also found out where the two troublemakers came from. Our Kaidai Veranda's service is top-notch. In the imperial capital, no one dares to be the first if we're recognized as the second." Mu Qingya looked at the woman speechlessly. "You're the only one who likes to joke around. There's no such thing as being number one forever in this world. Anyway, you just have to put your heart into whatever you do." "Yes." Mu Qingya picked up a thin yellow booklet and handed it over. "It's winter now. These are the dishes that Kaidai Veranda will be focusing on for the next 3 months. Take a look." "Yes, madam." The woman in the green flowery coat took the booklet with a smile and said happily, "With madam's help, I guarantee that Kaidai Veranda will become popular in the imperial capital again. Qing Miang, keep a close eye on Precious Painting Workshop. Madam, don't worry. The flowers that madam brought over earlier have already been made into the first batch of jewelry. They're selling very well." They chatted for a while. Mu Qingya was a little tired, so she waved her hand and dismissed everyone, leaving only Tsong Lu to serve her. Mu Qingya picked up a cup of tea and put it down heavily. She said worriedly, "Men, send a few people to follow young master. If there's any news, report it as soon as possible." With Chen Er's cold personality, it was a little inconceivable for him to coax a little girl back. If it really didn't work, she would have to make a trip herself. "Madam." The little girl named Tsong Lu pursed her lips and said, "She's just a girl who's been wandering outside for more than 10 years. Aren't you worrying too much?" "What girl?" Mu Qingya glared at her coldly. "Don't be rude. I've spoiled you all too much and don't know the rules at all." Tsong Lu's eyes reddened. She hurriedly knelt down and lowered her head. "I'm sorry, madam." Tsong Lu said the wrong thing. Tsong Lu shouldn't have said such disrespectful words to Mississippi. Mu Qingya didn't say anything else. She just picked up the teacup again and glanced at her indifferently. Under the vast sky, the starlight formed a long river. Miss Qiao had already been wandering around for 4 days. She didn't know how many places she had wandered through in her muddle-headed state. She only felt that she was extremely miserable. It clearly had consciousness, but it did not have a physical body. It was a pitiful soul that wandered through the endless night until dawn, when the first ray of morning light illuminated the earth. What entered Miss Qiao's eyes was a vast expanse of snow. The scenery of a world of ice and snow was imprinted in her eyes. Have I wandered to the end of the world? Miss Qiao cursed inwardly. In any case, her body was floating around uncontrollably. During this period of time, she had thought of contacting Little Tree. However, after several futile attempts, she gave up on the idea. What the hell was this soul-leaving talisman up to? Could it be that she left her body to cultivate her spiritual sense so that she could wander around everywhere? He wondered how Lotus was doing. She wouldn't go crazy, would she? Her poor Lotus. Miss Qiao floated all the way as she watched the sun rise above the snowy plains. It was like a small half of a salted egg yolk pressing against the horizon. Rumble. The sound of horse hooves rang out in the empty snowy plains. Chapter 23:47. Arbor floated and wanted to turn her head to look. Unfortunately, the little transparent body was not under her control at all. It continued to float forward. Then, she saw a large group of people riding on spirit stallions rushing past her. The people on the horses were all wearing black cloaks and their hair was braided. Looking at their speed, they were heading towards the glacier in front. The leader of the group had a shiny black braid swaying around his waist. He rode on a polar ice wolf and led the group of horses as they charged forward furiously. Miss Qiao floated forward aimlessly. To put it in a funny way, the speed at which she floated was not the least bit slower than the polar ice wolf. She did not expect that after leaving her body, her soul speed would gradually increase. Boom, 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 boom. The large group of people on the ice field made an extremely strong tremor. Arbor looked down at the transparent ice under her feet and then looked up at the group in front of her who was maintaining a constant speed. Such a big movement, but the ice field did not show any signs of cracking. It could be seen that this ice field was not formed in 1 or 2 years. The layer of ice below was probably a few stories high. Float, float, float. Boom, 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 boom. Float, float, float. Miss Qiao waved her small hands and spun her small body. She increased her speed and floated to the side of a lady on a horse. At first glance, she felt that this lady was a little familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen her before. The entrance to Heavenly Ice Snow region is in front. Everyone, put in more effort, hurry up. We must reach it before noon. It will be even harder to travel at night. Yes. Everyone replied in unison. Heavenly Ice Snow region? Xiao Mu was startled, and then she thought excitedly. Oh, so this was not the end of the world. She floated all the way to a place called Heavenly Ice Snow region. She wondered which part of the divine continent was this? Knowing the name of the place was not of much use to her. Her soul floated uncontrollably, and who knew where she would go next. But looking at the current situation, it seemed that she was also floating towards Heavenly Ice Snow region. Cough, cough. The woman on the horse was wearing a thick furry cloak, and her head was wrapped in a thick velvet cloth, only revealing a pair of pretty eyes. A gust of wind hit her in the face, causing her to cough repeatedly. When she inhaled, she felt as if a cold wind had been poured into her lungs. It was so cold that she felt very uncomfortable. Princess, it will get colder if we go further in. I'm fine. The woman gritted her teeth and urged her horse to gallop forward to catch up with the group in front. However, her physical strength was not as good as those men, so she slowly fell to the back. Arbor floated beside her. Looking at her little face that was red from the cold, he lowered his head to look at his own transparent little hand. This place was too cold, and they had been traveling for a long time. It was impossible to constantly mobilize spirit energy to protect one's body. Over time, the cold air would enter one's body. If one didn't have good protective measures, even the strongest person would easily fall sick. The closer they got to the Heavenly Ice and Snow region, the colder the aura became, causing them to shiver from their bones. Akira's lips were completely purple from the cold. She took a large cloak from her inner world and draped it over herself. She was now wearing 2 cloaks and a large cloak, but the cold air penetrated through the layers of clothing and went straight to the depths of her heart. Chapter 23:48. Her cultivation level wasn't high, and she had insisted on following them on this trip. She had long expected to suffer hardships, but she didn't expect it to be so bitter. The group of men in front of him also used their spiritual power to warm their bodies. However, in such a world of ice and snow, the occasional warmth didn't have much effect. Instead, after warming up, they would feel even colder. That bone-piercing coldness penetrated their clothes and entered the deepest part of their hearts. After a wild gallop, the group finally arrived at the entrance of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region under the lead of the polar ice wolf. They had madly galloped for nearly 4 hours on this stretch of road. It was really a case of a horse running to death by looking at a mountain. The glacier was clearly right in front of them, but who knew that it would take so long to run? At noon, they gathered at the entrance of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region. Ming Yas tried his best to suppress the restless roar of the polar ice wolf beneath him. He raised his eyes and coldly gazed at the beautiful scenery of the glacier towering into the clouds. The scenery in front of him was truly spectacular. At a glance, countless large and small glaciers appeared in front of them. The entrance to this place was a glacial canyon. On one side of the ice wall were carved with uncanny craftsmanship, Heaven of Ice and Snow region, land of extreme cold. On the other side were carved, 10,000 people enter, 10,000 people die. Only an extremely thin crack was left in the middle for people to enter. These two lines of words were carved crookedly. Clearly, they weren't carved by the same person. Who knew which almighty cultivator was so sick as to leave these words on the ice wall of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region? Leave the spirit stallions here. Ming Yas made a decision and jumped down from the polar ice wolf. We must enter on foot. Yes. The ice layer inside was too thin. Once it broke, what they would face would be an extremely terrifying glacier attack. Akir was wrapped in two cloaks and a large cloak. The corners of the large cloak were dragging on the ground. She walked forward while panting. Brother Yas, should we walk in? Ming Yas glanced at her indifferently. Yes. His gaze was still fixed on the two smooth ice walls. At this moment, Akir also saw the crack between the two ice walls in front of her. The uneven ice surface was very eye-catching under the sunlight. There were also many sharp icicles left on the two ice walls, which looked very aggressive. Let's go. We must find a place to set up camp before it gets dark. The little girl floated over and hovered beside Maya's. At this moment, she saw clearly and recognized Yasi. After all, he had clashed with this fellow several times, so it was impossible for him to not remember him. However, he didn't have a deep impression of it. Of course, she wasn't familiar with Akir. As for his brother Yas, Arbor didn't recognize him at all. What was this guy full of violence doing in this world of ice and snow? Your Highness. Yas raised his hand to stop a guard general from speaking. He suddenly turned his head and shot his gaze in the direction of the young lady. There was nothing there. How could it be? ACI frowned, then turned around and said, "Let's go." The group followed his footsteps and quickly walked toward the crack in the ice wall. The little girl floated along, occasionally looking up at the ice wall that reached into the blue sky. What a tall ice wall! What was waiting for her in this world of ice and snow? Chapter 23:49. There were still a few rays of sunlight, but when they landed on the ice wall, they were so faint that they were almost negligible. They couldn't melt the thick glacier in the slightest. The group didn't speak. Instead, they looked focused and even a bit nervous as they quickened their pace and passed through the steep crevice. Creak. A soldier who was just about to lift his leg turned green, and he slowly put down his left leg. When his gaze shifted to the side and a ball of snow-white mink fur suddenly jumped out, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Just now, his heart had almost jumped out of his chest. That damn creak made him think that the glacier under his feet had cracked. Ah, what a cute little thing. Akir's pale face suddenly showed some joy. Ali took a few steps forward, picked up the little thing, and handed it to Akir. Keep it for now. When it's fat, it can go with wine. Arbor! You bunch of cold-blooded people actually want to drink with a mink that doesn't even have a bit of meat. That snow-white little mink's hind leg was still bleeding. It looked like it had been pierced by an icicle. At this moment, it was lying listlessly in Akir's arms. Akir pursed her lips and smiled. She raised her hand to comb the little white mink's fur. The palm-sized ball was white and tender, and the mink fur on its body was very soft and slippery to the touch. Arbor pursed his lips, somewhat disdainful of Akir's smug look. Wasn't it just carrying a little mouse? Was there a need to be so happy? It was as if she had never seen the world. Strange, why wasn't she floating anymore? A trace of confusion flitted across the little fellow's eyes, and she waved her little arms and legs. Keep floating. Why did you stop here? Hurry into the ice heaven snow region. Since the golden talisman jade tome sucked her soul out and let her float here, it couldn't be aimless, right? If she wanted to float back to Mo Yen's side, she had to think of a specific way. The little fellow floated in the air and shook her little arms and legs. Something's wrong? Her soul body was uncontrollably rushing forward. Wait. What are you doing? Golden talisman jade tome, I'm breaking off relations with you. Damned soul-leaving charm, you. Don't cause trouble. Her spiritual body was actually pulled over by an irresistible force, directly crashing into the little white sable's body. Me. I'll destroy your grandpa. The little fellow moved its little paws in confusion. It had a physical body now, but the physical body was a mink's claw. Ow. Especially that hairy face, which was still fused into a certain someone's proud chest, and that claw covered in danku was still rubbing her head with all its might. When the little girl completely woke up, she felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. She was so angry that she felt dizzy and had nowhere to vent her anger. She stretched out her little chubby claws and tore the woman in front of her. Hiss, ah. Akir shrieked and subconsciously withdrew her hand. The small marten nimbly kicked its legs and landed on the ground, limping towards the depths of the glacier. Damned little bastard, how dare you scratch my hand? Akir screamed angrily. Bring it back for me. I'm going to skin this damned mink alive and use its fur to make a cloak. Inhumane fellow. You actually want to capture me to make clothes? The little girl angrily ran away. Chapter 2350. She's so small that she can't even be made into a mink fur collar, yet you want to make a cloak out of her. Why don't you go and die? Thump, thump, thump. The little girl ran with all her might, already using all her strength to drink milk. Then she discovered that the back of her neck was lifted up by someone. She turned her head and met a pair of cold eyes. This damned violent man, it's him again. The little girl kicked her two calves with all her might, looking like she was punching and kicking. The corner of Ming Yasa's mouth twitched inexplicably as he met her pair of black, beady eyes. He saw that those beady eyes were filled with anger. Yes, it was anger. Why did he feel that this low-level little mystic beast was so human-like? This was really demonic. A little low-level mystic beast that had yet to develop intelligence actually felt anger? Brother Yas, I'm going to kill her. Miss Chiao's angry curses turned into a squeak, and her little furry face immediately flushed red. Fuck, this little beast couldn't speak human language. This was a low-level little beast. Was there anything more tragic than this? Her soul was embodied in this little beast. If she was killed by that woman, would she be in danger? Would her soul be imprisoned in this dead little beast's body forever and not be able to come out? Roar. What's the point of bickering with a little beast that has yet to develop intelligence? Ming Yas glanced indifferently at Akir and flicked her dagger away with his fingertip. Akir angrily stroked the back of her hand, which had 3 bright bloody scratches, and stomped her feet in anger. Brother Yas. You'd actually rather protect that little beast than ignore the injuries on my hand? You're really getting worse as you live. How can you be angry with a little animal? Yas directly put the little white mink into his arms. All right, let's continue on our way. Akir gnashed her teeth in hatred. Seeing this, she had no choice but to take the medicine bottle Alex handed over and smear it on the back of her hand. The little girl lay in Yasa's arms with a look of despair. Who asked her to discriminate against weak little animals? Now she had turned into a little animal. Her current appearance was so small, not even 1/5 the size of that white squirrel on Paradise Planet. Oh my God. It was the smallest mink she had ever seen. He did not even look as strong as newbie back then. Sob, 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 of all people, why did you choose to possess such a weak mink? Xiao Mu lay there in despair for a while longer until Ming Yas stopped walking. The group found a relatively flat area to set up camp. They cut off all the icicles that could injure or trip people and threw them to the side. An hour later, the camp was basically built. Dozens of barracks, big and small, were erected one after another on the glittering glacier. One of the soldiers took out a match from his pocket, but before he could light it, it was slapped away. What do you want? We're stepping on a glacier right now. Do you want the glacier to melt and collapse? Are they going to bury us all? How can an ordinary fire extinguisher melt a glacier in such an extremely cold place? The soldier shouted, unconvinced. Can't you see that the sunlight can't reach here? When Ollie heard the commotion in the tent area, he hurried over and scolded the soldier who took out the torch. Rest early after eating your rations. We have to continue on our way early tomorrow morning. Everyone, listen up. Don't cause any trouble. Chapter 23:51. After Ollie finished exerting pressure, he brought the guards back to Ming Yas's side and gave him a simple recount of what had just happened in the barracks. Ming Yas didn't pay much attention to it. He nodded and had Ollie withdraw. After ordering someone to bring in a bathtub, Ming Yas called for a water spirit master to fill the bathtub with water. Only then did he have the person leave and take off his coat. His fingers touched the little mink in his embrace and he pulled her out. Seeing that the little fellow was curled up into a ball and sleeping soundly, he poked her head with his finger and placed her on the carpet at the side. Splash. Splash. The sound of water made the tired Miss Xiao lift her eyelids and slightly open her small bean-like eyes. Barracks? Why did she vaguely see the back of a person bathing? Miss Xiao's small black eyes suddenly widened, and her little furry face was filled with disbelief. This perverted Ming Yas actually took off his clothes and took a bath in front of her? Did he still have any sense of shame? Sure enough, he was a pervert. A moment of carelessness and she almost grew a needle's eye. Miss Xiao angrily stomped her leg and felt the pain in her small foot unbearable. She didn't manage to pounce out of the barracks. Instead, she rolled on the ground and made a little noise. Ming Yas turned his head and saw that the little white mink was currently limping towards the barracks entrance. He didn't seem to make any movements, only lightly waving his hand. A strong suction force pulled Miss Xiao's body over, and she fell into the water. Ah. Pa 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 pa. This repulsive, damned stinky man actually made this crown princess drink your bathwater? I'll whip you to death, you bastard. The little paw exerted all its strength and swung towards that handsome face with a smack. When Guiying came in with her master's clothes, she only saw that little animal brandishing its claws and brandishing its fangs and claws as it slapped her master twice. She cried out in alarm and rushed forward. She quickly put down the clean clothes in her arms and reached out to grab Miss Xiao's limbs. Ming Yas stared blankly and raised his hand to stop Guiying's actions. Pulling Miss Xiao in front of him, he stared at her small eyes that were filled with anger and coldness. After looking carefully, he could not help but laugh. Guiying, don't you think that this little fellow is a little too quick-witted? I've never seen a low-level little mystical beast with such lively eyes. Your Highness, let this servant bring it down first. Yas waved his hand noncommittally. Such a small thing can't hurt me. Guiying frowned and looked at the little white mink that was still in His Highness's hand and was still using its little claws to slap His Highness's arm. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but when the little white mink looked at him just now, it did seem somewhat human-like. Your Highness, this servant will help you get dressed. Nodding his head, Yas suddenly stood up from the bathtub. Arbor stared at his bare chest with a dumbfounded expression. His gaze moved down 2 inches, and then he hurriedly moved up again. A pair of small meaty claws slapped at his head with all his might. Smack! The little guy exerted all his strength and leaped. He landed on the ground with a plop and rolled out of the tent with water stains all over his body. Perverted fellow. Who wants to see your moldy and stinky body? Her Lotus She wanted to go back and see Lotus. She wanted to go back and see Lotus wash her eyes. Ming Yas had a baffled expression. What was going on? Why did he see grief and anger in the little fellow's eyes just now? Isn't this mink a little too emotional? Chapter 2352. Guing was also dumbfounded as she stared at her mistress for a long while before she hurriedly helped her mistress put on her clothes. Your Highness, did you notice that the way that little white mink looked at you just now was a bit strange? You think so too? Guing nodded solemnly. This servant feels like it was looking at a lecher. Ming Yasi. Thank you. This prince's taste isn't that heavy. After the grief-stricken Miss Xiao rolled out of Ming Yasi's tent, she dug a hole in the glacier with all her might. No, she was shaving the ice with grief and indignation to calm her emotions. Calm down, don't panic now, don't panic. You must calm down. Talisman. 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 There must be a way to dispel this soul-leaving talisman. After it was dispelled, the soul would definitely float back on its own. Ah! The little fellow's claws dug into the ice with all her might, and her originally injured claws started bleeding again. When Ming Yasi walked out wearing an open-collared white robe, he saw the little animal crazily digging at something in front of his house. What are you doing? Ming Yasi picked her up and frowned at the bloodstains on her claws. Guing, bring the medicine. Yes. Ming Yasi carried the little animal back to the tent, threw her on the carpet, and held down her struggling claws. Don't move. This little fellow was quite troublesome. From time to time, she would spasmodically use her claws to scratch people's faces and arms. She really didn't know where he got the kindness to keep her by his side. Akir is waiting outside to catch you and make you into a mink cloak. Ming Yasi's words caused the little fellow's body to stiffen slightly. The latter's hand paused. When the cloak was mentioned, the little fellow actually stopped struggling. As expected, she could understand human language. Ming Yasi glanced at her with slight astonishment in his heart, and then his mouth twitched rather speechlessly. What was going on? At this moment, he actually saw the meaning of, there was nothing left to live for, on this little fellow's furry face. As an ordinary mink, could this fellow's expressions be so rich that it bordered on the freaks? Pfft, Guing immediately turned to look at His Highness with a look of astonishment. Master was actually amused by a mink? Don't worry. As long as you're obedient, I definitely won't let Akir make you into a mink cloak. Your Highness, Lord Dongshan and Prince Chen of Tsangzhou want to see you. Although Ming Yasi had not returned to the underworld state for long, he had already grasped the situation in the Tsang state and the Divine Prefecture. He also knew who King Dongshan and Prince Chen were. He had also thoroughly investigated Prince Chen's background. As for the Eastern Mountain King, he was just a king with a different surname. Now, the Eastern Mountain King's mansion had few talents and was going downhill. However, it was better to meet the fourth son of the Duan family, who was now Prince Chen. Rumor had it that he was favored by the first emperor in the Tsang prefecture and was doing quite well. After bandaging the little fellow's injured leg, Yas, who had switched from carrying the little fellow to carrying him, had a mysterious smile on his face. Guing stepped forward and drew the curtain for him. Carrying the little white mink, Yas exited the tent and slowly walked forward. From afar, he saw the face of a middle-aged man with a full beard laughing at him. Greetings, Your Highness. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and smiled. Greetings, King Dongshan. Ming Yasi glanced at the middle-aged man indifferently and sneered. I heard that the winter hunt chosen by the great emperor of Tsangzhou is here. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.